If you like competitive games but never got to experience what it feels like to play and to master GunZ the Duel, man, you're missing out. You're actually robbing yourself of a life experience unlike any other.
Fantastic!
GunZ has the highest skill ceiling and actions per minute of any game ever created when being played at the highest levels. Esports legends such as Dyrus and Daquan got their start playing this legendary cult classic. After dedicating over half my life to playing and supporting this game, I thought it was only right that I go ahead and document every single piece of important GunZ history I could find on the internet before this game officially re-releases later this year. As the years go on, more and more of this content I'm about to share with you turns into lost media, so the point of this video is to preserve all the GunZ history myself and many others experienced, while also giving you all the context you'd ever need for why this game touched so many lives over the last 2 decades. Join me as we step into an internet time machine and explore every significant piece of content as it pertains to GunZ the Duel. This includes a nearly full timeline of update history with patch notes, tournament winners, dramatic community moments, and so much more, all with sources listed in pretty much sequential order. Without further ado, I'll see you guys in 2004. GunZ's initial release date is cited as 2004, and in some places as early as 2003. However, even if you're an old player, you likely weren't playing in 2004 because the game was only released in Korea at this point. There's very little information online that I can gather about the initial release date of GunZ. However, we do know that the game instantly became a free-to-play success in Korea. As a native English speaker, I wouldn't even begin to know where to look to find out some of the initial launch information about GunZ. Not only was the internet a vastly different place with so much less information at this time, I also don't know Korean, which makes it really hard to use tools like the Wayback Machine to verify any of the information from this time period. Because of this, nearly the entirety of this video will be about the international official versions of GunZ, and there would be a few over the years. What I was able to find though, which I think is a great little look back into the past, is the initial Korean GunZ Beta trailer, which if you're a GunZ player, this might feel like watching Bizarro GunZ. As you can see in this footage, a lot of the animations that we know and love are not the same, as well as many of the in-game assets appearing differently than what the game actually launched with. I thought this was a really cool little peek into the birth of GunZ, and you'll be able to compare just how far GunZ has come from this initial beta footage all the way back in 2004 to some of the upcoming eras of GunZ history that we'll cover. A few things are for sure. GunZ, even in 2004, was a third-person shooter with an emphasis on action combat, such as wall running, sword and gun combos, backflips, basically all the cool shit from the Matrix movies. Every character while in-game has HP and AP, hit points, and armor points respectively. You can equip gear that can be purchased with in-game currency that alter these statistics, as well as a bunch of different weapon types with their different various statistics as well. Equipping your character and purchasing new items would be done in the lobby area. GunZ is a super old game, so it actually had a server selector where anybody could create a game and anyone could join said game because the game utilized peer-to-peer connections and didn't need dedicated servers for each individual match. Every item in the game has an associated weight, and your character could only carry up to 100 weight, and this was used as kind of like a balancing tool. For example, rocket launchers were one of the heaviest weapons in the game, so if you wanted to equip 2 rocket launchers, you would pretty much be able to equip nothing else, and you would have terrible stats because, like, how are you gonna fit those 2 rockets in your pocket, dude? GunZ also featured some RPG aspects, like a gear unlocking system tied to leveling by killing other players online, gaining you advantage over lower level players along the way. When you killed a player, you'd gain experience and bounty, and that would further along your account. Some gear was locked behind levels, meaning you'd have to gain both to progress. GunZ also featured some lore aspects to it, however, no story was ever formally really established on the game. For example, when you make your first character, your character will have a choice of weapons, and they have names pertaining to the lore, such as Axiom Gun Knight or Travius Scout, and well, as you can see here in this image, a few others. While this didn't do anything outside of literally starting your character with a different weapon type, the developers were clearly intending on these words meaning something in the game eventually, I'd imagine. The small tidbit of lore from the website back in 2005, which you can see here, is more or less just an excuse for why you're a cool Matrix guy fighting other cool Matrix guys. It definitely definitely wasn't the focus of the game. If you happen to be one of the few players who was around during this 2004 GunZ era, likely living in Korea yourself, and you'd know where to start looking to try and find some of this lost media, I bet the entire community would love that. I did attempt to visit the old Korean Guns Netmarble site using archive.org, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to work on that site in the 2004 and 2005 range, so it's very hard to gather information, even when I put in some effort. I've noticed a trend where I see a lot of clout chasers nowadays claiming to have been playing since 2003 or 2004, but unless they were Korean Guns players at that time, and in the 2003 case, maybe they were alpha testers? I have no idea, but what I do know is an oddly high amount of players use these dates as their start dates, but they're either lying or mistaken. You can see here from MAIET's old website, they developed it in 2003 and released it in Korea in 2004. I digress. Due to there being so little information I could track down about the beta and the launch of Korean Guns, this era of GunZ history will undoubtedly be the shortest, because the amount of information I was able to gather once the game was localized in English will honestly shock you. Knowing where to look is half the battle, and thankfully I've been insanely involved in this game starting with the summer of 2005. With that said, I'll see you guys there. On June 4th, 2005, my life would forever be changed, and International GunZ was officially born. The developers of GunZ, MAIET, would release the download link on their website, gunzonline.com, for the first time and add this open beta banner. International GunZ was released to the public as a beta, and as its name suggested, finally made GunZ open to the entire world to get their hands on. I personally didn't know about GunZ on this exact release day, but I would begin playing GunZ at some point in the summer of 2005 through real-life word of mouth. There weren't a lot of quality free-to-play games at this point on the internet, and GunZ, frankly, even on the surface, looked like a pretty cool game for that era. Being that International GunZ was just a beta, it was lacking quite a few of the features that Korean GunZ had already had, as well as many items. Because of this, I'm going to tell you everything that was released at this point just to start forming a timeline of when things were added to the game. Once I'm able to establish what was released as the base game, it'll more accurately paint a picture of all the progression the devs made throughout the life of the game going forward. I think a fun place to start would be that there were no hats in International GunZ. While International GunZ shared an identical UI to Korean GunZ, just translated to English, it was lacking many of the armor sets, including all of them with hats. So players could see the hat slot in the inventory, it was just useless. There was nothing to actually equip there. While I don't think it's worth highlighting every single weapon or item that was included in the game upon release, I'll give you some of the iconic stuff here. Keep in mind, I'm using a private server called FXB Guns to show off most of my B-roll for this entire video, so a lot of things won't be perfectly accurate to how they were 20 years ago. Katanas and Kodachis always stood out to me as having very cool designs, with them looking cooler and cooler as you level up. The level 30, 40, and 50 katanas I feel like were all iconic, and you'll still see people choosing, especially the level 50 katana, the Golden Dragon Sword, or as it was called in International GunZ, the Yongwal Rang, to this day. It would have its name localized into English a few years later. The golden shotguns were definitely iconic as well. The Breaker 7 unlocked at level 30, and the Breaker 8 unlocked at level 45. At level 50, with your Golden Dragon Sword and golden shotguns, you felt like you were on top of the world. The last iconic item that I want to mention that I feel like a lot of people really look forward to unlocking in iGunZ was the level 21 Yuriki Longcoat. That thing was a staple. I think honestly everyone liked it so much because it was one of the very few animated items in the game. As time went on and everyone got more tryhardy about this game, long flowing coats definitely became less popular, as it didn't make your hitbox bigger, although that was a rumor for a while, but at the very least it does make you a bigger target and easier to see. I remember constantly being in conflict, trying to decide what I wanted to buy from the shop next, as bounty was kind of hard to come by, especially if you were new to the game and wanting to try out a lot of different things. While I didn't want to share every single item in the item shop, I will share with you every single map that was released with International GunZ, as not many more maps were added over the years, and a lot of these are still staple maps that people love to play on to this day. There's also a fun few little Easter eggs about some of these maps that you may have not known that I'll let you know about. iGunZ released with 13 maps. Going in alphabetical order first, we have Battle Arena. This was a pretty commonly played map for death matches and eventually competitive play, but really wasn't played too much back in this 2005 era. The coolest thing about Battle Arena, and this is going to be a theme with the developers of GunZ, MAIET, is that it is a straight up rip-off from the movie Gladiator. I'll show you a side-by-side of the Gladiator Coliseum and the map Battle Arena right now. There's no denying it. Next is Castle, and this map is unique because it was one of the maps that the game locked behind a level requirement. Let's talk about level requirement maps really quickly. GunZ is old, as you know, we're talking about 2005 right now. There was no skill-based matchmaking, not only in GunZ at this point, but really in games in general. Most games used a lobby system, and GunZ was no different. However, to circumvent completely new players getting absolutely crushed by players who were higher level and more experienced, they used the game's RPG elements to create certain channels. The level groups were separated, as you can see on screen here, but basically, Veteran Channel, which was unlocked at level 11, would unlock you 2 maps, Port and Ruin. Expert Channel, at level 21, unlocked access to 2 more maps, Castle and Dungeon. Unlike the previous channels, you could stay in Expert Channel all the way up to level 99. There was no max level for this channel. And lastly, Elite Channel gave you, nothing. They did end up adding 2 Elite Channel maps, making 2 per channel past level 11, but that wouldn't come for a few years. We'll get there. Anyhow, Castle was an iconic map in GunZ. Castle was definitely the most popular map for playing deathmatches or Berserker post level 21. Castle was also popular because it featured a large open area with 2 bridges and Oblivion below, and a few walls to post off of that made for a great spot to get into some air duels once players were starting to learn animation cancels and could suspend themselves in air consistently and not kill themselves. By the way, fun fact, back in international GunZ, Oblivion was actually called Hell, so when you died it would say you've fallen into Hell, but this was later changed to say you've fallen into Oblivion. The next map is Dungeon, and this was the other map besides Castle that you'd unlock at level 21. This map wasn't very popular. In fact, it's more known for being a quest map in the future, and one of the worst clan war maps once that was released.
Another not so great thing that Dungeon was known for was that a lot of the walls in this map seemingly were left uncoded, meaning when you try to wall cancel or interact with them in any way, you just fall down into oblivion and die. My boy Tony calls this butter walls. A few maps have butter walls in GunZ, but Dungeon is the worst.
This is the second map that is clearly stolen media. As you can see here, I'll compare on screen again. The dungeon pillar area is identical from the scene from Lord of the Rings. From the little pattern on the base of the pillars to the shape of the door entrances, it's super obvious. Factory is next, and this map is great. I bet a lot of people won't remember this, but you could actually only do 8-man death matches at Factory back on the official servers. This map was too small to allow for 16 players, but honestly, they should have just let us do it. This is one of the most loved team deathmatch maps, as there's basically no camping spots whatsoever. Next is Garden, and speaking of TDM maps, this has to be one of the most popular ever. Garden has a large outside area and a tunnel system underneath, allowing for multiple styles of play.
From the very beginning, there was always speculation that Garden was simply the outside courtyard area of Mansion, as if like the 2 maps were connected. Although you obviously couldn't travel between the 2 maps, they just look so similar with the architecture and all.
Some players would camp the tunnels and use that noob flip slash mechanic under the low roof, where you couldn't recover and would get instantly killed. Not me, by the way. I would never. And good players who could actually aim to kill people would play outside and slowly get lured in by the noobs being patient underground. Super popular map. Anyway, moving on. iGunZ also had Island on release. Island was actually the first map I ever played on, and I think it was a great introduction to the game, honestly. Seeing players getting flipped off the middle area into hell and dying made me realize that I could just noob people with a sword, and I honestly think this might have been what started my addiction. I can still remember the first time I got that blue text in the chat box on this map, dude. What a dopamine rush. This map definitely wasn't popular for competitive play. Even though it was in the Clan War map rotation for the long haul, it was just a very campy and potshot heavy map. Moving on, the next map was possibly the most iconic map in all of GunZ. Mansion is likely the first map you ever played on, especially if you just started up your own lobby, as it was the default map whenever you created a room. I'm not sure why, but I like to think it's just because the developers liked it the most. This was the deathmatch map up until you reach level 21 and could start playing on Castle. Not only was it the second biggest deathmatch map, it was also very popular in team deathmatch as well because the community created a game mode called Attack and Defense. Essentially, this map is very symmetrical with a base on either side and a large open area with 3 floors in the middle and this big scary devil guy. The community decided that this map would be perfect to take turns camping on and call it Attack and Defend. So basically, one team attacks, meaning they can actually leave their base, and the other team defends, and they are not allowed to leave their base beyond this point. This seriously was around from like the very beginning of GunZ until the end of the official servers, and I wouldn't be shocked if there's an attack and defense game going right now for nostalgia's sake on a private server somewhere. Mansion, however, is stolen media just like those other 2 maps. It's a clear ripoff from the Mansion in the first mission of Devil May Cry 1. Regardless, Mansion definitely in the top 2 most iconic maps for GunZ. Next is another level locked map, being Port. Port is unlocked at level 11, but was in the competitive rotation from the start to finish and is overall considered a pretty well liked map. Rarely, especially in the early days of GunZ, you might see a deathmatch on this map, but it was largely just played in clan wars. It has 2 areas, an open outdoor garden area and a more confined like streets part of the map. Typically, players played on the streets, but every so often a clan strategy might take them outside. All in all, Port was pretty good. Up next is the only GunZ map to ever have a second version of itself, that being Prison and Prison 2. Prison wasn't very popular, but I feel like you might see a deathmatch on this map every so often in the early days, and that was alright. This is the last of the stolen media maps, so out of the initial 13 maps that released, 5 of them contain stolen media. Take of that what you will. Prison and Prison 2 for that matter have an area of the map called the shower room, and it's clearly taken from this scene in the movie The Rock. I mean, this is so wild. Can they legally do this? I mean, it's cool, but damn, this was a weird little rabbit hole to find, because before my research I only knew about the Battle Arena ripoff from Gladiator. Prison 2 was actually a clan war rotation map, and it was genuinely despised by the community. One team always camped here, and it was super sword heavy due to the tight spaces, and just, yeah, no one liked it. I just showed off Prison with Prison B-roll because Prison 2 is just a smaller version of Prison. Okay, I'm almost done with maps, I promise. The next map is Ruin. This is the other map you'd unlock at level 11 along with Port, and it has to be one of the least played maps in GunZ. It wasn't in the competitive rotation and the community just never really liked it. It's a huge map, but the spawn doors were so tiny that people would stand in these doorways to troll and block their own teammates in here. Good times. The next map was also barely played, and that's Station. This map also wasn't in the clan war rotation, players rarely chose it, and yeah. It's nearly a perfectly symmetrical train station with a billion boxes to potshot and run behind, and all the entrances just feel small and claustrophobic. One of my least favorite maps for sure. The final map though, and possibly the best map in GunZ history, is Town. This map isn't exactly symmetrical, has a long back alley flank route, has 2 lanes to fight in the middle, good cover with the clock tower and car placements. I mean, they just really nailed it with Town. Town, even from the start of iGunZ, was super popular and has always been the most popular map for team deathmatch, clan wars, 1v1s, you name it. Town always had this glitch, and it even works to this day, where you can see through this wall as if you had like wall hacks or something if you just stand in this corner correctly. The only annoying thing about Town is in the back alley especially, there's a lot of little nooks and crannies, and if someone was low and wanted to wait out time to draw or win the round, they'd often be able to hide around and make that happen. So yeah, there you have it, all 13 launch maps for GunZ. Now that we're done with all the maps, you'll notice that any B-roll footage that I use from this time period of players actually playing, it's exclusively played on Town, as the competitive community, which is the only replays we really have left, would exclusively only play there for the most part in this era.
I feel like we covered all of the core systems of the game with the shop, bounty, level up system, maps, and all we're really missing on release now is the game modes that the game released with. Many of the game modes that would come to make GunZ iconic, such as Clan Wars or Quest Mode, were not actually present during the years of 2005 and 2006 when iGunZ was active. Here's the game modes that were in the game during this time. Deathmatch, Berserker, Team Deathmatch, Gladiator, Team Gladiator, Assassination, and Training. Deathmatch is self-explanatory. Berserker is just a deathmatch, but the first player to get a kill at the start of the game gets Berserker mode, which gives them double damage, but they also slowly lose health over time. When the Berserker kills another player, they regain some health, so overall it's a pretty huge buff. For whatever reason, Berserker as a game type was actually locked behind levels. You could only play it from Veteran Channel onward. This would be the only game type to ever be unlocked behind levels. Once you reach level 11 and could actually play Berserker, I do feel like it was more popular than Deathmatch for casual play or grinding levels. Team Deathmatch is also pretty self-explanatory. In GunZ Team Deathmatch, when you die, you don't respawn until your entire team is dead, and when you eliminate the entire enemy team, you get a point. First to a certain number of points wins. Gladiator is the swords-only version of GunZ, which would go on to gather its entire own community within GunZ. From the start, there was a section of players who absolutely adored the sword play in this game, and for good reason. Team Gladiator is just like TDM, but swords only. Assassination is basically VIP from other games. One player gets chosen at random on the team, signified by a glow around their character to be the VIP, and if your team's VIP is killed, you lose the round. This game type was rarely ever played, but it was a nice change of pace in the early days when there wasn't a ton of content to do anyway. The final game type, Training, is just a deathmatch, except you won't gain XP if you die, and you won't lose XP if you suicide. Keep in mind, International GunZ, while it was active and running for about a year and a half, basically got 0 content updates, so everything I just named as far as items, maps, game types, that was it. That was all the players had for the entire duration of iGunZ. iGunZ did launch with a fully functional replay system, which I'm grateful for because we still have some media from that time period thanks to the YouTube channel GunZ Memories. iGunZ did have a clan system as well, but at this point it was literally only for a sense of community, as there was no clan war mode or any associated ranking system. Clans did, however, begin to create their own clan wars by creating private lobbies and scrimming against each other. Clan vs clan in a team deathmatch, typically a best of 20, but occasionally a best of 10. I am not exaggerating when I say every single piece of saved media from this era is either an unofficial clan war on town or a 1v1 on town. Town and town only. This was all just for pride, which GunZ players had a lot of, perhaps even too much. Because of the insane skill ceiling the community ended up unlocking, this game got incredibly competitive, and because of that, incredibly toxic. Because there were no ranking systems and this was all community driven at this point, I think it's fair to just mention some of the top clans that existed in iGunZ at this time. In the future, there would be a ranking system and tournaments I can reference, but for now, I'll just say some of the top clans according to myself and others that I've spoken to were Flower, Curse, Basic, Epic, and Shodu Kote. Sorry for the pronunciation on that last one, I have no idea, dude. Now that we've established all of the content that was in the game on iGunZ's release, let's get moving on the timeline of GunZ history. Going forward, I'll be touching on key dates where major events happened now that we've established what we can consider the quote-unquote base game. The first of those events happened on June 25th, 2005. GunZFactor.com became the first GunZ fan site to launch just a few weeks after the release of the international GunZ Beta. GunZFactor was launched by a fellow GunZ player, Citizen, who was very passionate about web development at this time as well as GunZ. With a lot of the information I've gathered in this video, I've managed to get exact dates, but unfortunately some things will just be approximations, or the earliest date I can find proof of something because I'm just digging through things that are lost to time. I know at the very least GunZFactor existed on June 25th, because on the homepage of the site you can see here, the post at the bottom of the page, Deathmatch Tips by Citizen, was posted to the site on June 25th. It could have been open earlier, but we're rolling with it. This archive.org backup is actually from July 16th, so almost a month later, but it definitely existed and possibly even a few days sooner. This website became the hub for GunZ discussion, with its forums eventually amassing over 120,000 users before it was all said and done. In the early days of GunZFactor, this website was used as the platform for the developers of GunZ, which, by the way, MAIET was a very small team who created this game. I'd say overall 10 or less people. MAIET did have 2 outward-facing employees that stayed in contact with the English-speaking community and kept them up to date, that being Venister and Guntrix. MAIET did have their own forums on their GunZ Online website that was the source for downloading the game in the first place, and, well, not much else. But honestly, no one ever used them because GunZFactor was sick. GunZFactor not only had forums for players to discuss with each other about the game, it also had many guides and tutorials for new players to learn about the game, something MAIET basically did not have at all back then. So GunZFactor basically became essential for GunZ players to have a sense of community. As the years went on, GunZFactor would morph into the hub for the competitive community as well. A hub for shit-talking, toxicity, trolls, and God knows what else. There's a small part of me that knows that it's for the best that it's gone. I'd have to go back and scrub my entire post history, but man, I still have a feeling down to my bones whenever I open up a web browser. I just want to type in GunZFactor.com and go see what the community is up to, and I haven't been able to do that for like a decade now. I was able to find this way later in 2016 when the website was much less used, that I was the number 8 poster of all time in post count at the very end. However, I did have multiple accounts because I was a troll and would frequently get banned on my main account, so I was so addicted to being a nerd I'd make new accounts. I mean, I had another account with over 4,000 posts, so yeah, I'm probably like in the top 2 nerds of all time or something, dude. GunZFactor would close down at some point in July of 2016. As you can see here, this very nice message was left by the 3rd owner of the website, someone who had never even played GunZ before. He had some nice words to say about us. Speaking of GunZFactor, the next important date for this era of GunZ brings an entire new discussion: GunZ gameplay and how quickly it evolved from playing within the Matrix to breaking the Matrix. The earliest mention I can find for K-Style, which, if you're unaware, are the advanced community-found animation cancels that turned GunZ into the absolute classic that it is today, is October of 2005. No exact date, but definitely close. Because this is the first time that a K-Style guide has shown up on GunZFactor, we know that K-Style had to have existed in iGunZ at some point between its release in June and October when this guide went up. I remember that very quickly the skill cap in this game began to rise, and that was thanks to one legendary GunZ player, Kraise, or Korean. Kraise is responsible for bringing Korean style to iGunZ. As you know now, Korean GunZ had already been out for quite some time at this point, and the Korean players had begun creating animation cancel combos that were referred to as K-Style. K-Style is the reason that GunZ is what it is today, and the skill ceiling, I'd argue, is continuously climbing still to this day, because that's just how insane GunZ is. I'm not sure whatever happened to the original Kraise, but being as famous as he was for bringing us K-Style, he sure has had a lot of imitators over the years. Thankfully, because of Guns Memories YouTube channel, which has preserved a ton of old replays from back in this time, we can see some of this era's gameplay with Kraise. If you're used to seeing players play nowadays, you'll notice that these players aren't anything special, but for the time they were insane because most of us players thought that like running on the wall and shooting at the same time was an advanced move. Kraise would never go on to be one of the best, but he will always be one of the most influential for being the first. GunZ would go on through its wild glitches and animation cancels to develop a few different quote-unquote styles over the years. K-style was of course the most popular style and, like I said, made GunZ what it is today. I don't want to cover every single combo of every single style or we'd be here all day, but what I will do is link this handy glossary down in the description in case you want to see all of the cool little moves that people made up over the years. This glossary definitely doesn't have everything, especially newer animation cancels, but it has a lot. We should make a new one as a community one day. Quickly, while we're talking about the different mechanics players would use in game, I need to touch on leading, or lead shot. In GunZ, the most uniquely awful netcode is present. It's peer-to-peer, but not like one person becomes the host and everyone connects to that one player and they act as a server. No. That would have been better. It's peer-to-peer, as in every single user connects to every other single user. Because of this, there's no server per se to parse the data between the two user clients. And to keep it simple, wonky shit starts happening. For one, the ping you see to other players isn't their ping to the server like you'd expect in most games. It's your ping to them, which is why it shows 0 ping for yourself. One of the side effects of this awful netcode is leading. In most games, you shoot your gun, you get a hit marker or a hit indicator, and you know factually that that enemy got hit. Not in GunZ. Hit markers, depending on your ping to the other user, may have completely missed by a lot. If someone has 30 or less ping, you could more or less shoot directly at them as you'd expect in any game. But once you're at 40 ping and above, you need to start leading your opponent, as in shoot where you think they're going to be in 50 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, whatever your ping is to them. The higher the ping, the more you have to lead shot. It's like the most messed up, janky bullet fall off where you gotta do math based on the lunar phases or whatever, dude. It's fucked up, man, is what I'm saying. I've put an example on screen of how much you lead based on ping in the background here. It was made by a famous player named Archetype back in the day. Moving on from lead shot, D-style was also discovered in this era, and some players began playing with a dagger as opposed to a katana. Using a dagger obviously wasn't as easy as using a sword. For one, you can't block, which was useful for some animation cancels as well as just straight up protecting yourself. Daggers did less damage than swords, but they attack super quick. You could stun lock a bad player, basically. Everyone during their noob days of GunZ falls for the trick of using a dagger. The alternate fire, which on a katana is a flip or an uppercut that knocks your opponent into the sky, is replaced on dagger with a lunge that gives you very little time to react, and if you don't jump quick enough after being hit with this, you will fall directly to the ground, basically becoming a free kill for your enemy. Daggers were also unique because while most players played on females because the animations were just much nicer for K-styling, daggers were better on male characters. The replacement for a slash shot while using a dagger was called a yo-yo, and it could only be performed on a male character. I'm no expert on D-style, so I'm not even gonna try to touch on the mechanics or anything specifically, but I did reach out to a player named Hellsguard, who is one of the most legendary D-style players to ever do it and will come up again later in this video. Hellsguard credits players Slap, Conflict, Druko, and Skyzena. I actually remember Sky. That unlocked a memory for me. I'm pretty sure they were like the only female dagger player. Yeah, anyway, Yoshi Blood and Shadow Skulls as influential and great D-stylers over the years. There's some other information in this message from the man himself if you want to pause the video and take a look. Another style you'd hear players claim was E-style, and frankly, to real GunZ players, this is a joke. E-style was short for European style, and this basically meant using a rifle and playing the way the developers intended. Get the fuck out of here. I don't even know why this got called E-style. We should have just called them sprayers and kept it moving. I also think gladiators were basically their own style as well, although they didn't exactly have a cool stylized name. The swordplay in GunZ is insanely deep, and while it's true that when you have two shotguns shooting someone in the feet, a sword doesn't do you much good, if you're both using swords, the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper. Angles are huge in Gladiator, and basically an attack, block, or massive all have different functions depending on the angles between you and your opponent. Some gladiators were insane at being able to get recoils, while some gladiators would never get recoiled, and as a K-styler, I basically had zero idea what was going on when it came to some of the minutiae with swords. In fact, I could probably make an entire video just talking about the ins and outs of Gladiator alone, but because swordplay is so prevalent in all types of GunZ gameplay, I'll show you one quick example. When you hit someone's block in GunZ, typically your character will be recoiled, meaning their animation locked in place. The person whom you attacked will receive something called a massive strike, indicated by the glowing sword. Occasionally, you could receive the massive but also not recoil someone. That also has to do with angles, but I'm not going that deep here. Your natural reaction is going to be to attempt to hit your enemy with that charged up attack. However, a unique meta was formed around massives that developed over the years. Players learned that the massive hitbox is more like a donut around your player, meaning the range on it was much farther than a normal slash. You could block a massive just like you could block a slash and not get hit by it, but it turns out if you're farther away from the massive, you actually won't block it. If player A turns away from player B, who they're attempting to massive, and places his massive like behind themselves over here, it will actually still hit the player even though they're blocking. People discovered that you can look up while blocking or look down and blocking in certain scenarios to mitigate this, and yeah, it's a never-ending puzzle. This is just one example of like a million little skill-stealing interactions in this game. The same way a sprayer would never be able to beat me at regular old guns because I can K-style, I feel like I'd probably never be able to beat a Gladiator at their game either because the skill ceiling just goes so high. A player Cerberus is credited with being one of the first and best Gladiators. In a way, he's kind of like the Kraise for the Gladiator community, inspiring many others along the way. In a sense, it's great that the community managed to discover all these unique and game-breaking ways to play the game. The developers treated all of these styles as features, not bugs, and let them keep driving their game's player count higher and higher as word of mouth allowed for the number of active players to climb throughout the summer and fall of 2005 as the skill ceiling continued increasing. MAIET wasn't really concerned with iGuns because it was a beta. During this time, the developers were focusing on developing releases for Korean guns and looking for localization options for other guns regions. MAIET would go on to find hosts for multiple localizations of the game, including Brazil, Japan, and even India. That one didn't last long. One of the coolest things I found during all of this research is during this tiny little window where India Guns existed, they apparently would send you a CD so you could download the client from a disc rather than the internet, likely because their internet was so poor. I would do unsayable things for one of those GunZ CDs, dude. That's gotta be one of the coolest lost medias pertaining to guns that there is. If anyone has one, please let me know. While the developers were worried about localization in Korean guns, the community on iGuns stayed busy with the skill cap, which I think managed to foster the most competitive community in gaming history over the next few years. Before we get to the next timeline point, I want to take a brief moment to speak to the meta of the game, as the game's content was so stable during this time, an exact meta was formed and then shifted based on content releases from there. K-style was, and always will be, the meta way to play guns, barring a miracle. If you want to win, you'll get really good at the fundamentals of K-style, learn to aim, and then go from there. I'm sorry, D-stylers, don't kill me. K-stylers quickly learned that using a katana and 2 shotguns was the most effective method of playing the game, and that certainly was the most popular loadout. Occasionally you'd see the odd revolver or rocket being used, especially back in iGuns, but usually 2 shotguns. Because levels were the only thing holding you back from getting best in slot gear in international guns, experience was the ultimate thing that you would be grinding for. This is why you'll occasionally see GunZ references as an MMORPG back in this era, rather than a third-person shooter, which is what it truly is at its core. At this time, there wasn't even any pay-to-win added into the game yet, and the game was completely free to play. They were just out here losing money hosting the servers. I respect it, but don't worry, they get us back real good in the years to come. The most common way players initially would get experience was by just playing in death matches. It was probably the quickest way to legitimately rack up kills, but what about illegitimately? The community formed a new meta of leveling up, and the developers didn't seem to care at this time, whatsoever. So while it did defeat some of the integrity of the usual over 100 hours that you'd have to grind to get level 50 in iGuns and get best in slot gear, let me introduce you to the swap line. Swapping in guns basically means trading kills or wins back and forth. In this era, occasionally you'd get a whisper from another player in game who'd be like, hey, you want to swap? And the two of you would just create a private lobby and kill each other over and over and over, taking turns, removing all skill from gaining experience. But the community found a way to take swapping even further with the swap line. Players would create a berserker game at town, typically with 4 people, and all trade kills together. The 4-player number was perfect because you'd never be waiting for someone to spawn and run to you, avoiding any downtime. The berserker part was important because it would signify who dies next, as they were the last player to get a kill. It basically helped you know who was in line next. Once you'd spawn, you'd rush to the tower in the middle of town, kill the berserker, get killed, and repeat. This was definitely the fastest way to gain XP, especially if you wanted something lower intensity and weren't a god at the game. Obviously, if you could hold like a 70% or better kill death ratio in a deathmatch, there's a chance this might actually be a little slower. The swap line meta would last for all of international GunZ and wasn't outlawed until MAIET finally found a global host who would then enforce a no swapping rule. We'll get there. GunZ is not without its fair share of drama. Many would argue throughout its history it had enough drama for an entire lifetime and then some. The first gigantic piece of drama would happen in iGunZ. The Locust Plague would take place beginning December 14th and rampage through GunZ for almost a week. Why would a hack in an old Korean shooter back in 2005 have such an insanely sick name, you might ask? Well,
that's the name Locust Plague. Everything goes.
Yeah, since I managed to track down the man himself, I'll have him give his first-hand account of what Locust Plague was and how it came to be.
Well, the Locust Plague exploit was just based on a generic character deletion that was found in the game. There is a variety of cheats in the game, as I'm sure you're aware of, and we just found out that you could essentially just call the delete function with someone else's character name and a couple other pieces of metadata that were easy to just guess through, and the server did no authorization whatsoever, was happy to delete them for you. So the character deletion exploit was already being used before Locust Plague, but after we attempted to contact the developers about it, their response was a bit disappointing, so that's what led to the creation of Locust Plague.
So, how did he manage to spread this so-called plague?
You just had the Locust Plague executable, you launched the game, then you run Locust Plague. When you go back into the game, it would have injected itself. It would simply attempt to delete anybody that you came in contact with. The easiest way to do that would be just going through chat rooms and scrolling through the list. And I think the interesting thing about it is, Locust Plague was created just to highlight this character deletion exploit that many people were already doing manually. Locust Plague wasn't something that happened as much as an event as it was a program that was not ran by me or any of the guys I knew back then. It was actually offered to the community as a download to delete other characters. So there's kind of almost an interesting social science aspect behind this, that if someone was deleted by the Locust Plague back in those days, it wasn't by me. It was, a peer that deleted you, another person in the community, whether they meant to or not. I had it hosted on one of my servers for initial download until it was re-uploaded to multiple forums for people to download by people that it wasn't any part of my group. And I was kind of shocked to see we had, dozens and dozens of downloads within the first hour. So those are the people that did the deleting.
Before that though, HolyForce did also mention that he tried to report this exploit to the developers, realizing how badly this could negatively affect the community if it had gotten out.
We reported these bugs and we expected some sort of response of thanking us or asking us for proof of concept code or just some sort of collaboration. And instead, we got an insanely unhinged rant about being stupid Americans. And that was very odd and unprofessional, especially from a gaming company or a community-facing individual or company.
I had to ask, given he was doing this crazy shit in 2005, had he managed to one-up himself or do anything even crazier in another game?
Oh, I absolutely think so, but respectfully, I'd rather not talk about it.
Ultimately, it looks like HolyForce's exploit was patched about a week later, but with a hack so significant, it's honestly unknown how many players logged out of GunZ that day forever after losing all of their progress. And from here, it's all sunshine and rainbows. Oh, okay, it's not, but in more positive news, now that the most awful hack probably ever in this entire game's history has taken place, let's talk about GunZ exploits over the years. By this point in late 2005, early 2006, the source code for the game had leaked, and because of this, the first private servers were released. Private servers have basically been untouched throughout the entire history of GunZ. As far as I know, and I could be wrong about this, MAIET, the original developers of GunZ, never bothered to press legal action against any of these servers. These servers would release the premium items that were currently available in KGunZ and later on in ijji GunZ completely for free for players, and attracted more casual players who were interested in the more non-competitive aspects of the game. The first private server to ever release for GunZ, and I unfortunately do not have a date, it's just roughly late 05, early 06, was Legacy Gamers, followed shortly by another private server, Damon's Ring. I will not be touching on private server history unless it's very significant to the game itself, which there will be a few instances in the future where that will be necessary. These being the first two early private servers though, felt like it was worth mentioning. With the source code being leaked so early, this is one of the key components for why hacking was always so prevalent in GunZ. At least that's my understanding. I'm not very hack savvy, I'm not gonna lie. The developers were always fighting an uphill battle to get hacks and exploits patched in this game. Let's move on to the next point in the timeline. On May 18th, 2006, iGunZ basically gets its first ever content update outside of bug fixes and hack patches. GunZ's first new map is added to the game, Lost Shrine. I previously mentioned how different channels would have maps locked behind them, basically locking certain maps behind level requirements. This map was added to Elite Channel, the first ever map to be added to only Elite Channel. Before this, the level 35 channel was just a flex. The high skill lobbies were pretty much always an expert channel, and I remember Elite Channel mostly just having a training room or two going for people to chill in. After this, Elite Channel always had a training room and a Lost Shrine lobby going in it, so that was neat. This map honestly is pretty mid, but the mystique behind it being the only level 35 map at this time is nostalgic nonetheless. Let me take you now to September of 2006. I'm 11 years old, school has just let back in, and I spent the entire summer learning how to K-style on guns, and frankly, I'm pretty stupid because I'm 11. Now, I don't know if it was just me, but I logged in one weekend post-September 10th, and the community was in uproar. I had no idea what everyone meant by NA Guns, but everyone kept saying a new GunZ server was coming out. NA Guns was going to replace iGunZ, and I had no idea what any of that meant, so I had to head on over to GunZFactor and check it out. The fact that MAIET finally got hosting internationally to the largest potential audience, and the way they announce it is via this GunZFactor post with broken English, just... man, it was a different time back then. A few dudes really did just fuck around and accidentally make the best esport of all time, huh? Venister and Guntrix went to GunZFactor forums on September 10th, 2006 to officially announce that North American Guns was coming. You can read the entire post here, but I want to make a few things clear rather than read this whole thing out loud. For one, although this was being branded as North American Guns, and they go as far as to call it North American Guns on the official GunZ website back then, this was still International Guns. Venister and Guntrix would go on to confirm in the comments that the servers would not be region locked, only located in North America with a North American host. I can attest to you that some of the best players came from all over the world. Europe, Australia, South America, you get it. We never ended up sticking with the name NA Guns. It was called, well, ijji Guns, as spoilers, as this would be the company to go on and host Guns for us in the future. Two more key points to take away from this news post is that we would be getting the full game, no longer a beta server, meaning the missing game modes such as Quest and Clan War would finally be added, as well as MAIET was targeting a winter 2006 release date. And winter 2006 was absolutely fucking legendary. Welcome to the golden era.
Where gamers unite, ijji.
On November 8th, 2006, the ijji Guns Open Beta officially went live for anyone to sign up and try out. This was one of the most hyped times in GunZ history. After a year and a half of playing down the watered-down beta version of GunZ, we finally got what was essentially an MMO-style expansion to our game, and gave us dedicated players some content that we have been starving for. I'm going to go ahead and cover all of the new content that was released on the actual launch of the game, and just use this point on the timeline to talk about things that were specific to just the open beta. ijji would become the new mouthpiece for the game. No longer would Venister and Guntrix rarely post on GunZFactor as a way of standard communication. There were actual game masters being paid to moderate the game. There was a working and updated website with like news and updates, like this was a real game. The ijji beta didn't transfer over any of your previous progress from iGunZ, so the GMs did double XP during the beta for players to try and be able to get over those earlier levels and get competitive a little faster. They also wanted to show off some of the upcoming shop items that would be purchasable with real money, so they gave all players in the beta the full Grey Dust set and a fire element for their sword, which applied burn damage to massive attacks. It also looks fucking sick. This means after over a year, the first hat most seasoned GunZ players finally equipped after all of that time was a Grey Dust hat. These free items only lasted for the duration of the beta, and everyone's account progress and characters would all be deleted after the beta as well, giving one last hard reset to everyone on the official launch. While I'm gonna save most of the new content for the official launch, I do remember the newest GunZ map being available in the beta, and basically every single lobby was on the newest map, Stairway. Basically just picture 16 players, all in full Grey Dust, all in Fire Coin, all playing on Stairway Deathmatch for 9 days straight. What a time to be alive. The map Stairway was available in free channel in the beta, so you could play it even as a level 1, but eventually this map would be added as the second map behind a level requirement, being the second level 35 Elite channel map right after Lost Shrine.
The ijji GunZ open beta was a wild success, and everyone was so hyped to finally get the full version. The beta would end on November 17th, 2006. Players would soon get word of the official launch. The date would be November 29th, just 12 days after the beta had ended. Those 12 days felt like an absolute eternity to child me. In fact, remember those private servers I mentioned back in iGunZ? Those were alive and well during this era, and I didn't want to lose my full gray dust and firecoin, so I actually downloaded one of those for the first time ever. Not only did it have those items, it had literally every single item that was already in KGunZ for absolutely free. I'm genuinely shocked the 12-year-old version of me didn't just stay on private servers forever. With the upcoming release of ijji GunZ, none of our characters' progress would be transferring over either, and we'd all be restarting from level 1. But you know where I was, November 29th, 2006? On ijji GunZ, making my first character and riding the timeline that led me right here to making this video. You guys ever wish you jumped on that neurosurgeon timeline and were driving a yacht in the Caribbean or something? Yeah, me neither, dude. I'm trying to play some guns. Let's break down what was basically an MMO expansion worth of content that we all got on November 29th. For one, just like the beta, Stairway was released. Enough said. Quest mode was in the game. Technically, it was in the beta as well, but even during this full release of the game, Quest was nowhere near what it would be heavily developed into throughout the years. On release, the only quest was Mansion. No dungeon, no prison, which if you had jumped into GunZ at some point after this time, you may have never known that. But yeah, quest expansions definitely to come. Not only that, there were no bosses in the games yet. You could do a basic Mansion quest, or you could purchase from the shop quest items that were newly added to the game called Pages. Pages were a consumable item that you would buy with bounty in the in-game shop to essentially make the difficulty of your quest harder. 3 pages were released at the start of ijji GunZ, that being page 13, 25, and 41. The number attached to the page was the level required. For example, if you attempted to use a page 13 but your character was only level 12, you get an error saying that you were not a high enough level to start this quest. And as I said before, each subsequent page made the quest harder. Not only would new NPCs spawn during these quests, the higher level the page, the more stages, and NPCs per stage you need to kill. Basically, Quest reused mansion and garden assets to create new maps where monster goblins and other type of goblin-type creatures would spawn, and you need to eliminate all of them that spawned, and then a portal would open up and take you to the next stage. Depending on the quest, there were somewhere between 3 and 6 stages per quest. While I don't believe it was ever confirmed prior to this, if you look at both the mansion and garden, it almost feels obvious that these two maps are interconnected, like garden is like the courtyard or front yard of the mansion map maybe. The quest mode pretty much confirms that. I just thought it would be cool to mention, considering you go into mansion quest but then you play on some garden maps. Because there were no bosses, I feel like quest was largely unrewarding on release, like just spending your hard-earned bounty on pages just to earn back that same bounty. Quest monsters do drop items themselves. A lot of these are useless items that you can just sell back to the shop, but a few of these items would end up also being consumables that you would need to spawn the bosses once they were added later to the game. So the gameplay loop of quest was basically buy a page from the shop, kill all the NPCs. The harder NPCs could rarely drop you a consumable item that you would need to spawn a boss, get enough of those to consume your drops and do the boss fight for massive XP and bounty, and then repeat. But like I said, at this point, all you would do is burn page, farm items that you didn't know what they actually did, and then burn another page, and yeah, it wasn't very rewarding. This pretty much covers all of quest mode on release. Quest was the largest game type expansion probably to the game at this point. Before this, we only had PvP, and this added PvE to the game, so that was pretty huge. Speaking of game types, ijji GunZ released 2 new PvP game types as well, that being the Duel Mode and Team Deathmatch Extreme. The Duel Mode is basically the GunZ 1v1 mode. They added 4 new maps for Duel Mode, that being Hall, Catacomb, Shower Room, and Jail. This might be a fever dream, but I feel like Jail might have been added with the Prison Quest expansion years later, but I couldn't find any proof of that, so I'm just going to throw it in here that it was here at release. I'm not 100% sure, but maybe it's possible that Jail wasn't out until a year or so later. The Duel maps were based on areas of existing maps, or at least themed to match them and used existing assets. Hall was like Mansion, Catacombs was like Dungeon, and Shower Room and Jail were both from Prison. How weird that these would be the ones to all go on to be quest maps too. They must have really loved those 3 maps, huh? All stolen media maps as well. Weird. The Duel Mode is still one of the most popular game types to this day. It only requires 2 people to get a public lobby going. Whoever wins the 1v1 moves on to face whoever's next in line, and it just keeps on going infinitely until someone hits the kill limit. Speaking of who's next in line, do you guys remember swap lines? Yeah, not allowed anymore in ijji. Now that ijji was out, they had working player rankings and clan rankings on their website, so they wouldn't want you gaining all of that experience illegitimately
legitimately. They also had a financial reason to ban this, but we'll get there later. The newest best way to level up was to go into a deathmatch and prove yourself, or weirdly enough, even Clan Wars were pretty good experience because Clan Wars had a 20% bonus XP for every kill you get. The gaining XP meta would shift a few times over the years as players battled on the leaderboards to have the most XP and eventually be the first one to level 99. Anyhow, that other game type that was new, Team Deathmatch Extreme, was basically like a normal TDM, but you respawn in 5 seconds just like a deathmatch, and the goal was the first to get to 100 kills. Think of like a Call of Duty TDM, basically. This game type was rarely played. The community much preferred a standard TDM. Another new thing that came out with the launch of ijji is that there were now voice acting on certain emotes. So when you died, some asshole could spam /laugh on your body really hard and fast. This was later patched so that people couldn't be as annoying with it, but there were always workarounds, and yeah, laugh spamming on someone's body was a core element. It was basically a part of K-style. I mentioned Clan Wars a moment ago, and they also officially launched with the release of ijji GunZ on November 29th. This game mode, unlike Quest, was not available in the beta. Clan Wars could only be played on the Clan Wars server, and Quest could only be played on the Quest server. There was only a Quest server during the beta, which is probably why there was no Clan Wars, I guess. With the new release of Clan Wars and Duel Mode, there was now a feature added where if you had won 10 duel matches in a row, it would announce in the room number that it happened to the entire server and show your username. It's kind of like a flex. The same went for Clan Wars. If you won certain amounts of Clan Wars in a row, like 3 in a row, 5 in a row, 7 in a row, there would show it in the chat for everyone. And then over 10, it would show you every single win. So when you had a huge streak, every single time you won, the whole server would know. It was pretty cool. Clan Wars became the lifeblood of the competitive community. No longer did they have to be driven by the community and the community only. The game itself would track your wins and losses for you and update rankings. I can't confirm this, but November 29th and November 30th were basically used as like a ramp-up period for these Clan War rankings, and they're going to be lost to time. The official ranking actually started tracking in the month of December of 2006. Using the Hall of Fame section of the old ijji website on archive.org, you can see here for December 2006, Ocean was the first ever clan to finish rank 1, making, I'd say, competitive GunZ history. I use archive.org for basically all of the sourcing in this video, if you were curious, by the way. The other clans near the top here are some of the legendary clans I mentioned from the iGunZ era before there was ever a game type that basically tracked who the best players were. Anathema was a remake of Basic for ijji. Someone had stolen their clan name, I think. Flower, you can see, has the top win percentage and still aren't rank 1. The ranking system basically valued a combination of both winning games and playing games. So the fact that Ocean had played a few thousand more Clan Wars makes a huge difference, and that's why they're rank 1 over Flower, even though they had a worse win percentage. The system would be tweaked a little throughout the years, eventually valuing the number of players in the Clan War into the point system as well. A 2v2 Clan War wasn't worth as many points as a 4v4 Clan War, if that makes sense. The Clan Ocean was a staple throughout all of the ijji GunZ golden years. Also, during this first month of Clan Wars, there was nothing but your raw skill being required because ijji GunZ didn't actually launch with a cash shop, meaning the only advantage you could get was being higher level than other players. Remember the cool gray dust and fire coin they gave us? You couldn't even give them your money to buy that. At this point, ijji GunZ had the exact identical items that iGunZ had, and it would be that way for over a month after the initial launch in November. Crazy to think that a free-to-play game during some of its peak years didn't monetize at all, but boy did they make up for it eventually. Since we briefly covered the first clan rankings, we can take a look at the individual rankings for XP during this time as well. A snapshot of archive.org on January 10th, 2007 shows this top 20. Most notably here, I think, is F-Hyeta, who was the leader of the Flower clan, who absolutely stomped a lot of people in this era, so that's pretty good proof that playing and dominating enough Clan Wars could get you up to rank 2 on the experience leaderboards in this little infancy period of ijji here. There's a few other Clan War players on this list as well, so it definitely was a really great way to get XP back then. Alright, I think that fully covers every single piece of new content that was added with ijji GunZ during its launch. From here, nothing will take up as much time and be as massive as getting the initial game, that being iGunZ, or this move over to ijji. Basically, everything from here is going to have a date attached to it, and we could start breezing through this timeline. Have you been enjoying this so far? Can you like the video and comment stuff and share it with your old GunZ friends, dude? There's no way you watch this much, right, and you aren't having a good time, so help me out and show this video to people, and okay, I love you. Okay, thanks, bye. There was only one update on ijji GunZ for the rest of 2006 that I think that was worth talking about, and I swear I can't actually even find proof that it happened, but I know that we were introduced to Snowtown during the first ever seasonal event, the 2006 Christmas event. I can't corroborate this, but I just remember playing on Snowtown like right after the game had come out. You'll just have to trust me on this one. We'll call it December 2006. Snowtown would return during subsequent winter events for years to come, and this is a good time to mention that there is also a Halloween town created for Halloween events every year. This is literally just the town map with extra assets thrown on top of it, but it was just so cozy and fun, dude. The game just felt so loved at this time by the developers. As 2006 wraps down, and as you can tell by the transition, I want to let you guys know that we are now entering what myself and many other players would consider the golden years of GunZ. You could argue that everything that we just covered up to this point was a nice little peek in GunZ history too, but nothing will beat GunZ the Duel's competitive scene and content updates from 2007 to 2009 in my eyes. Okay, 2007 doesn't actually start off that great, guys. Even though this era slaps, it's also the start of the slipperiest slope in all of gaming, pay-to-win garbage. January 10th, 2007, the ijji GunZ Item Shop officially releases, marking a huge, significant point in GunZ history. Never before could international GunZ players support their game financially in any way, but now they could, and not only could they do that, they could also purchase an advantage. This news post here is announcing a buy 2 items, get 1 free event in honor of the shop opening. I don't know why they worded it this way, they made it sound overly difficult in this news post, but yeah. The item shop opened with a pretty wide selection of choices. I'll briefly explain this all because it sets the tone for the pay-to-win model and how the meta would shift going forward. The ranged and melee weapons were essentially lower leveled versions of the best in slot weapons that you could already earn through getting a higher level in game at this time. For example, in this initial list of guns released in the cash shop here, the most popular item was probably the Cruelazon. This gun was purchased a lot because shotguns were the most popular guns, and for only requiring level 24 to equip, the shotgun did 9 damage, which was the same damage as the level 45 shotgun you could buy in the shop with bounty. The only trade-off would be that the Cruelazon did have 100 more delay than the Breaker 8, making it slightly slower to shoot. Not only was getting the gun earlier than level 45 nice, it also meant that you could equip 2 9 damage shotguns, where previously players were equipping 1 9 damage shotgun because only one existed in the game, and 1 8 damage shotgun. You couldn't equip 2 of the same item. ijji knew this gun was important too, because you could only purchase this item for a limited duration. This gun would run you $4.70 for 180 days, which looking back is still ridiculous. This same balancing basically applied to all weapons in the shop. Purchasing means getting best in slot gear but levels and levels earlier, thus saving you time on your journey. Thankfully, the armor sets worked a little bit differently. While you could buy individual pieces of armor sets, for example, you could just buy a hat, they also did sell the full sets though. Most players opted to purchase the full set because unlike the Cruelazon's limited duration of 180 days, you could purchase the full sets for an unlimited duration. These items stuck with us until the very end. These are the first 4 sets that launched into the game: Ceremonial Dress, Adventurer, Eternal Blue, and Iron Crow. The real 2 first sets that we had to choose between were Eternal Blue and Iron Crow. The game was already out for a month at this point, so anybody who gave a shit about it was definitely beyond the level 15 required to equip either one of these sets. These level 15 sets not only allowed you to increase your max HP and AP, a lot of the gloves and boots were much lighter in weight compared to their free-to-play counterparts, meaning you'd have more room for special items or rings. Rings, by the way, we haven't talked about. They were just stat boosting items essentially. You would get 2 per character. Of these 2 sets, Eternal Blue ended up being the much more popular one because, I mean, look at it. Do you want to be a cool pirate or the person with flames in their pants? I'm not going to cover every single set that releases into the item shop, by the way. That would be mad. In fact, I'll only bring up the item shop again if a new item releases that kind of alters the meta or the way monetization works. It was basically every 2 weeks from this point on that a new item set or 2 would come into the shop. These items had already been in Korean guns for years, so really tuned in players kind of knew what was coming and what to expect, just not necessarily in what order. We were just playing catch up with K-guns at this point. Before we step away from the item shop, let's touch on the special items category because that's super important to the meta. On release of the item shop, premium medkits were released. This was far and away the most OP thing to ever be seen in guns at this point, and maybe forever. There were free-to-play medkits in the game for sure, but they healed at most 60 HP and AP while requiring you to take 6 meds, which was time-consuming, and you needed level 40 in-game for these, and they were heavy. Premium meds were only level 15, healed 20 per med, and you had 5 of them, so you could re-heal 100 HP and AP while using less meds than the free-to-play ones. And they were lighter. It was so strong. It's basically a second life if you could just get away from your enemy to heal yourself. Of course, being the most OP shit in the game, this was only for sale for a limited duration. You could only purchase prem meds for 30 days at a time, and it was like $10 for 30 days. The coins you see here in the shop are like the sick things that you saw from the beta, like the fire sword. They also had an ice, poison, and a lightning sword. These were never used competitively, but they were definitely cool, and the cool factor sold a lot of these. The skill ring is also important, because remember earlier I said they'd have a financial reasoning to stop people from swapping to gain XP? The skill ring, I believe, gave a 15% boost to EXP gained. However, you would be sacrificing the stats that a ring would give you otherwise, so at least there was some sort of balancing there. EG went as far as to implement a system against swapping called EXP lock, where if you had killed the same player over and over, the game would detect that and stop your account from being able to gain experience at all for 15 days. They wanted you to buy that damn ring, and if you could just swap line and get super easy experience, you'd be less likely to want that 15% boost, I think. The last thing I felt was worth mentioning here was the Ring of the Great Emperor, as this remained the meta ring to have for basically the entirety of this game's lifespan. 2 of them actually. They provided you not only some AP, but 5 extra weight, meaning with 2 of these equipped you'd have a max weight of 110, which was super necessary to have max stats and premium meds equipped at the same time. For whatever reason, you could equip 2 of the same ring, but never 2 of the same weapon, even though you had 2 slots for each. Additionally, the Ring of the Great Emperor was an unlimited duration purchase, just like the armor sets, and the EXP ring and prem meds were limited duration. I have no idea why or what their logic was for what was limited and what was unlimited, but I'm sure there was some sort of money-making meta going on behind the scenes. I did some napkin math, and to be fully competitive and not at a disadvantage on the cash shop's release, you need between like $30 and $50 depending on how crazy you're trying to go. And it was 2007, man. Jesus Christ. Didn't they know the housing market was about to collapse? That covers the entirety of the item shop on release. Let's get the hell out of here. I'll only let you know when it gets worse from here. That was another huge section with a lot of info, but now that I won't be covering any of the cash shop releases outside of meta shifts, this will start to cover more of history. Well, EG did hold events during this time period and honestly did a great job of keeping the community engaged for years. A lot of the updates are just not worth noting, like cash shop rebates, getting to play with the GM, etc. If a noteworthy event happens, I'll be sure to mention it. Speaking of noteworthy, next on the timeline is the biggest update the game has seen content-wise since its release. Nearly 3 months after release, on February 27th of 2007, GunZ would get its first expansion to the Quest mode. Found in this archived EG news post, which, by the way, isn't this so sick and nostalgic? We have news of 2 new bosses and a whole new map being added to the Quest mode starting on February 14th. With the release of the Dungeon Quest, all new enemy types would be released. Every new map going forward would release with its own unique enemy types, just in case you were wondering. Mansion had goblins, Dungeon had skeletons and mages, and the later released Prison Quest would have lizards and kobolds. The same mechanics that applied to the watered down Mansion Quest EG already had also applied to Dungeon, meaning you could use a page 13, 25, or 41 to up the difficulty and drops your quest receives. The only difference now is that the quests weren't exactly watered down and now had actual gameplay loops, because the items the monsters would drop on these pages would now be able to be consumed in order to face 2 new boss fights added to the game with this update, the Goblin King and Superion. Let's start with the Goblin King, or GK as the questers called him, was, you know, a giant fucking goblin with a giant fucking hammer. Look out! You'd have to sacrifice a goblin skull and a crimson necklace from your drops to fight the Goblin King, and if you defeated the Goblin King, you get a fat EXP and bounty drop. But surprisingly, they didn't drop their famous equipable items on release. These actually came out a few months later. Superion was a giant scary skelly man boss for the dungeon map, which functioned largely the same way. You use 2 dungeon mob drops as consumables to spawn him. These 2 new bosses had 1 more drop in common, which was the last thing worth mentioning in this quest expansion, and that's Torn Page 65. Pages 13, 25, and 41, as previously mentioned, could be purchased in the shop, but these bosses now had a rare chance to drop a page 65. Meaning this was now the highest level requirement in the game. Not only was level 65 a ridiculously high level, at the time of release there were only 5 players in the entire game who could even run a page 65 at that time. Of the top 5 who could do it on February 17th, 3 days after release when I was able to grab this backup, one is a GM who likely just made themselves level 65 to test the content to make sure it wasn't broken. You can tell by their kills and deaths. Maximus and Maximilla, and I'm not 100% sure, but this was community rumor, were just swapping partners who kept killing each other to rank 1 and 2 all throughout the start of EG, and were eventually banned for swapping. So realistically, 2 legitimate players could actually run a page 65 on release. Actually crazy stuff. Rarely is content release dead because the player base just literally isn't experienced enough to be able to do it. I was curious if these 2 new bosses would shift the meta to make quests the fastest XP in the game, but I went forward like a month and a half after this date, and the high scores still have a ton of Clan War players in them. I do think that slowly throughout the next few updates, questers start becoming the highest ranked players by experience, showing that questing does become the level up meta. Speaking of next updates, let's get there now. March 19th, 2007, we got one more quest mode update. This is a minor update. It almost feels like it was accidentally left out of that February 14th larger quest update. The two new bosses that were released in February now dropped equipable items for the first time ever. These items will last in your account for 7 days, and you can farm as many of them as you wanted, assuming you had the materials to do the boss and got lucky enough. Going forward, every quest boss that's released gets 2 equipable drops. The Goblin King dropped the Goblin King hat, the first ever free-to-play hat added to GunZ, as well as the Goblin King's rocket. Superion's 2 items added to his drop table were the Demon Bringer sword, which was sick looking by the way, and the Demon Hands gloves, which were not as sick. This covers that entire update. Wasn't that short and sweet? Let's try to make a few more of the timeline points like this. April 11th, 2007, a noteworthy item is released into the cash shop, and whenever the cash shop is brought up now, it basically means the GunZ players are getting sucked dry even harder. No pause. The Battle Brood set is released, and while a set release isn't usually noteworthy by itself, we see our first change to the monetization strategy by ijji with the set release. Previously, when you purchased a set, it was for an unlimited duration. That set was yours to keep forever, or until the game died anyway. Battle Brood marked the end of that era. From this point on, every set that was released was now for a limited duration. Battle Brood, of course, offered the best in slot stats for the game as well, just naturally. For $7.80, you too could own the best armor in the game for a whopping 90 days. From here on out, every few months, a new set with higher HP and AP would release. Typical pay-to-win power creep garbage. That's rough, man. Only 90 days. Lots of players opted to only purchase the body on this set, as it's basically the only piece of the set that actually looks good. We cared about our fashion. I mean, what is this helmet? This is a special helmet, right? So I don't bang my head. All right, let's move on from this scumminess. On May 4th, 2007, we may have the biggest update that GunZ has ever seen yet. Not only did we get another expansion to the quest mode, but the legendary GunZ Narrator was added. I can't believe I played GunZ for nearly 2 years without the Narrator. It's such an iconic piece of this game, it's weird to even imagine the game without it.
Excellent! Fantastic! Splendid! You killed them all! Let's rock!
You know what I mean? The newest quest expansion was to the dungeon map, and it added 2 new bosses, Aneramon and Lich. Aneramon was basically on par with Superion, the other dungeon boss. Dungeon is all about spooky guys and skeletons, so now we had the spooky to go with the skelly. Lich was the first, I don't even know what to call it, demigod boss, maybe? While Aneramon had basic loot you could earn from pages as its consumable items, Lich had insane consumable items in order to spawn him. To fight Lich, you need to consume a Devil's Dictionary and an enormously huge skull. These were both drops from Aneramon and Superion respectively. You see where I'm going with this? You need to farm the regular bosses in order to fight against the demigod boss, which is a term I'm just now making up and that we should all roll with. Lich, for whatever reason, I feel like had the reputation for being the hardest boss, but honestly, it may have just been that it was the hardest boss to farm consumables for. I think, frankly, at this point in history, it probably was the hardest skill-wise too, though. As you know by now, each new boss had 2 new equipable drops that the player could get, so I'll tell you what those are, and we'll move along. Aneramon dropped the Odd Gun ×2. These were a strange pistol/revolver combination thing. They were really never ever used, but fun to get once or twice just to try out. Frankly, all of the quest items dropped by bosses were never as good as the pay-to-win stuff, or even the shop stuff, but I feel like it was just more of a flex, I guess. Questers, you can let me know. The other item dropped by Aneramon were these hideous leather-wrapped shoes. Lich's 2 drops were the Wings of Catastrophe, which are absolutely sick Kodachis, and the Dark Lord trousers, which were also sick pants. Not gonna lie, Lich definitely had the coolest of the drops, you can't even argue it. This, in my opinion, is when the meta for gaining optimal XP shifted from performing insanely in Clan Wars with that bonus 20% XP to efficiently completing quests and bosses. I say this because in the top level rankings in the middle of summer in July, a few months after this update released, you'll start to notice quite a few questers in here. Namely, Convict99 was a famous quester, leader of the Quest God 65, which would be known as one of the best quest clans for a long time. Quest clans, as far as I know, existed to help each other out with the rare consumables and to assure that you always complete the quest, and an optimal time to assure your XP rates were as high as possible. I don't think Convict invented this meta per se, but he would remain in the top 10 level players for basically the rest of ijji beyond this point. Now I think is a good time to mention some ways players were avoiding the no swapping for easy XP rule. Mostly because it's just nostalgic, but these were also pretty meta ways to level up. As you know, GunZ has always been a glitchy and hacked mess, but this hack was kinda harmless and mostly just benefited players. Hackers would figure out how to make hacked lobbies, creating death matches using the tiny duel maps with a max of 16 players. These lobbies were absolute madness. Players would have a rule just by stating in the game lobby title, naked only, meaning we'd self-impose you'd have to remove all of your armor so your character was squishier, meaning you'd die quicker. Players would spawn, chuck a few grenades, explode and die, and do it all over again. This was far and away the fastest way to gain XP if you could actually stumble upon one of these hacked lobbies. You wouldn't get in trouble for playing in one, only if you were the hacker who created this lobby in the first place. Another funny thing the community did was create clans called One Kill We Leave. Because Clan War had a 20% XP boost on kills, these clans would plead to get a single kill in the match and then they'd leave the clan war. Both parties would benefit because the low level guy trying to get XP would, well, get XP. And the clan would get a free win after they left. Even though this is clearly some sort of form of loophole swapping, it would avoid XP lock, and for whatever reason, the GMs never enforced that this wasn't allowed, so the community did it. Around this time, those keyboards with the macros built in, you know, if you have a gaming keyboard or a mouse, you can probably set it to remember some keystrokes in a row automatically. They were becoming super popular at this time, namely the Logitech keyboards. People would create Logitech keyboard macros and share them with each other that would automatically start a duel lobby, and one player would just kill another over and over. This would lead to you getting XP locked, but at some point the EXP lock stuff just stopped working in GunZ. I don't know if the GMs were ever aware of this, but yeah, just wanted to give some ways that over the years players would end up cheese leveling up. Players didn't for the most part care about XP outside of that niche high score chasing quest community. They just wanted to be able to equip the level 50 stuff so they can keep competitive. Now that quest is the EXP and leveling up meta, I basically won't touch on how players leveled up again. Alright guys, this is what I've truly been excited for. September 28th, 2007, the first ever Clan War tournament was announced. These Clan War tournaments would happen seasonally going forward for the next few years. This would be the Autumn 2007 tournament. The typical format of these tournaments would be as follows. A 2-week qualification period, typically the 1st through the 14th or so at the start of the month. The GMs would then use the Clan War ranking system so that the top 16 clans at midnight on whatever date they chose to be the cutoff would be the qualifying clans. Those top 16 clans would then be entered into a bracket based on their rank that month. First place against 16th, second place against 15th, so on and so forth. The first tournament was formatted a little bit differently as it was the only ever double elimination tournament. This first tournament also didn't allow premium medkits, but all of these players likely had purchased premium medkits to qualify for the tournament in the first place because this couldn't be enforced during the 14-day qualifying period, obviously, and ijji's trying to make that money. My guess is that this was just for the quality of the matches. Players rightfully thought that they were super OP at the time. Once you lost once, you'd go into the losers bracket, where you'd need to lose a second time to actually be eliminated. Now, I'm not going to go over every single team in every single tournament or anything, but thankfully I was able to recover a lot of the brackets, and we can talk about the champions and important matchups in every tournament. Tournament matches, unlike Clan Wars, which were a best of 7, were a custom private lobby set up by the GMs where they do a best of 20 on a predetermined map. If the best of 20 ended in a draw, they do a single round of sudden death. Because this was just a private team deathmatch, draws were possible and actually happened quite often in tournament matches due to the high stakes. Especially if you were the winning team, you'd rather take a draw than a lost round, which would lead to more camp-heavy gameplay in the tournament matches occasionally. In all future tournaments, they changed this format up a little bit until eventually settling on one, and I'll cover it in the future. In this tournament, because of the weird double formatting, there were some super unique circumstances to the finals. The clan Strike would go on to beat Standard in the finals. However, earlier, in the 8th round, Standard had beaten Strike, sending them to the losers bracket. Standard ran the entire winners bracket, never even going to the losers bracket. So in my mind, they should have done a best of 3, but I guess that just wasn't the format. And the winners bracket winner versus the losers bracket winner was a take-all game. Although Strike was 1-1 against Standard in this tournament, they would become the champions. Standard was a clan of European players, led by famous player Archetype. The rest of their lineup were all great players for the time as well. Fire Arrows, Yoshio, and Energy. Archetype wasn't only just a great player, he also popularized editing the XML game files to achieve the clean maps that players will play on for years and years and still to this day. Strike was a clan of Korean players. As you've learned by now, the link between GunZ and Korea runs to its inception, and this clan of Korean players were S-tier players for the entirety of ijji GunZ. Although they would go on to play under different clan names and different player names throughout the years, they were pretty much always in the mix. The lineup that won the first tournament finals was Dramatic, Genre, Musa, and Ghost Korea. I believe the player Ghost Korea Korea is the leader of the clan Strike, aka Scream, but I can't 100% confirm that. I'm just unsure who played on that character Ghost Korea. Everyone who played for Strike culturally was Korean. To what extent, I don't know, but based on latency, they were all physically located in North America at least. When I say the Korean players in future tournaments, it's this same core lineup from Strike with a few player swaps here and there. Really, there's not much else to say about this tournament, outside of giving the players who won this tournament their flowers for winning the ultimate competitive goal. The first tournament became the sort of crowning achievement that all competitive GunZ players strived for. I do want to note that Flower, one of the most dominant clans up into the game at this point, did not participate in this tournament or any future tournaments. From this point on, Flower seemingly slowly stopped playing GunZ. I do wonder what ultimately happened to them. Because these tournaments would take place seasonally, the 2 months in between tournaments almost felt like the off-season comparatively going forward. So anyways, congratulations to Strike on becoming the first ever ijji tournament winners on October 14th, 2007. Their grand prize, if you were wondering? Some in-game items, and an iPod Nano. The iPods would go on to be prizes for all tournaments for the next 3 or so years, though they would eventually start giving only premium currency to those who won in the future. Anyhow, less than 2 weeks later, October 23rd would be GunZ's next big update, another large quest expansion. Once again, we have a new quest map, this time being Prison. This again used assets from the existing Prison map to make new areas to progress through. Unlike Mansion and Dungeon, Prison Quest was released in a much more full state, including 2 bosses right from the very start. The theme of the monsters in Prison Quest were kobolds and lizards, and a giant golem for some reason. The 2 bosses were the giant Lizardman and broken golem. As with all bosses at this point in the game, these bosses dropped 2 new unique equipable items. The giant Lizardman dropped the lizard skin gloves and the battle axe, which was a katana actually, while the broken golem dropped the android mask and the shattered shotgun. The shattered shotgun wasn't ever really used in competitive play at all, even though it was a shotgun. Its whole gimmick was that it had lower delay and more shots, but it also had less damage. Overall, it just wasn't competitive or worth the hassle to go and get, just a fun meme item really. For whatever reason, even though at this point I was steadily a clan war player and never a quest player, I remember me and my clan decided to grind out the prison quest hard on day of release, and it was definitely more challenging than the mansion or dungeon quests to that point. The Lizardman boss specifically spawned in this tiny sewer, and it was surprisingly really fucking hard was how I remember it. For whatever reason, and I'm not sure at all why it was balanced this way, but Prison Quest basically gave you 0 XP compared to the other 2 quests, so Mansion and Dungeon were definitely better for the XP per hour or whatever at this point. Maybe Prison Quest gave more bounty? I'm really not sure. Maybe someone who was a quester back then can let me know why. Well, that pretty much covers everything that Prison Quest was. Let's jump forward again a few months, this time to December 24th, 2007, the release of the first Sparta clan video.
This is madness!
ijji was hosting a contest that I think was worthy of mentioning at the time, which would be the GunZ Cinema Contest. This wasn't as bougie as it sounds. Basically, it was user-submitted videos uploaded to YouTube, and the GMs would determine who won some in-game prizes. This was nice, because it did activate the community in a way that got us all engaged in what little social media there was at this time, being forums and YouTube videos, basically. A lot of players release frag videos or montages where you show off your best kills, typically synced up to some music with a decent level of editing. But this is 2007, remember, so like, the editing wasn't anything crazy, especially compared to what people can do nowadays. I think Sparta's first frag video is the most iconic video to ever come from any of these cinema events, which they would go on to host a few, so I wanted to get Sparta 1's release date and time on it here. I can't believe we're into December of 2007 and we're just now talking about the clan Sparta. If you have no idea what Sparta is, frankly, I can't believe you're even watching this far into this video. Holy shit. Sparta was the best clan to ever play GunZ. While they didn't participate in the first tournament because they were formed very shortly after that tournament, their reign of dominance basically from this point on in GunZ would be unmatched. Sparta was formed of former Ocean members, notably a few of their best members, Shot and Yong. While this split Ocean basically into 2 clans, you will remember Ocean was a great clan in its own right, earning rank 1 during the first month ever of ijji, and they got quite far in the first tournament as well. But now, many of those members would be moving to Sparta, but nobody knew how far Sparta was about to separate themselves, not only from Ocean, but from every other clan in the years going forward. While Sparta 1 was an iconic frag video for the community, ultimately it ended up losing to another video that I wasn't even able to find and may just be lost to time. If memory serves me correctly, it was a video that focused much more on the cinematic aspects of making a video, and it was very highly edited and especially impressive for the time it was made in. Still though, because this was basically the introduction for the average player into the future of the best clan, hindsight means that this video would end up being way more iconic than whatever video got first place. Well, that officially wraps up 2007. Let's dive on into 2008. 2008, like 2007, does get off to a rough start. There's a new best in slot item set released into the game that shifts the meta. That's the Deities Aura set, which was released on January 24th, 2008. One cool thing about this set is that it was actually designed by a community member and then integrated into the game. Quite a few sets over the years would be designed by fans and then added by the developers when ijji would host a design a set contest. The problem with Deities wasn't just that it was a limited time duration, because like all sets were at this point. It was because, like Battle Brew when it released, it became the new best in slot gear. Deities, at $8.90, was a little more expensive and had a little bit better stats than Battle Brewed, and it was enough to really catch on and become a meta set that users would at least use pieces of going forward. A few of the other sets that would be designed by players over the years were Fimbulwinter, Valkyrie, Zion Tactical, and the Fenrir Guardian sets. Alright, moving on to the next timeline point. January 26, 2008, the second ever tournament finals go to the clan Basic. Going forward, these tournaments would be every 3 months or so I'll do my best to condense it, and we'll just be timelining the dates that the winners were actually crowned rather than the announcement as well as I did with the first one. This tournament was no longer double elimination and Prem-Meds were now allowed, but was still 16 teams, and otherwise all the same rules basically applied. So Basic won this tournament right after I spent so much time hyping up Sparta a few segments ago. So if they're so great, why didn't they win? Well, Sparta, I'd argue, were the heavy favorites to win this tournament. ijji always did these bracket events, and you'll have to excuse the formatting. For whatever reason, this archive version of these websites just do not load the text in the correct place with these images, which is why I didn't show you brackets for the first tournament either. I know in my bracket, I'd pick Sparta to win it all, but unfortunately, as you know, I'd be incorrect. Sparta finished the qualifying period ranked 1 and fielded a lineup of Yang, Shot, Alinda, and Horror. Yang, Shot, and Alinda were all core members of Ocean, who had defected to create Sparta as kind of mentioned before, and Horror actually previously played with Strike, the Korean clan who won the first tournament. Horror himself was Korean, but wasn't in Strike's tournament lineup, so this was definitely a step up for him. Ocean didn't field a lineup this tournament. They didn't participate or qualify. And the bulk of the Strike lineup played in a clan called Forever, who was eliminated in the first round of this tournament by a clan called Back to Basics. Not only would Back to Basics, a European clan who had been pretty good in their own right for quite some time at this point, defeat Forever, they'd also go on to upset Sparta in the semifinals of this tournament as well and find themselves in the finals against Basic. Their lineup, and these guys were all core members of Back to Basics if I'm not mistaken, was Fashion, Tenalady, Polero, and Apollo. The match against Sparta was as close as it could get. It went down to a sudden death round where Back to Basics would bust everyone's perfect bracket and come out victorious. The finals would then be set, Back to Basics versus Basic. Basically, that's a lot of Basic. Back to Basics, after getting 2 huge upsets on the way to the finals, as I've already spoiled for you, did end up dropping it to Basic in the end in a rather lopsided match. Congratulations to NCSU Style, Twinken, Omega, and Fujimi. Twinken was a legendary player going all the way back to the iGunZ days. Omega would go on to great success with some other clan to be mentioned, and NCSU and Fujimi were great in their own right. Shortly after this tournament, ijji held a clan popularity contest from January 30th, 2008 to February 3rd, 2008, where the community could vote on who their favorite clan was. Weird event in my opinion, but I thought it was worth mentioning that even though Basic had just won the tournament a few days prior, Sparta won the popularity contest, just kind of confirming their influence in this generation, even though they hadn't quite won a tournament just yet. One other thing that I thought was worth noting for January 2008 was the release of the Gosu frag video.
Gosu.
This was, at the time, the most popular frag video ever released, and honestly, it holds up. It's a pretty good watch. Gosu is a player who, at this point, we haven't really mentioned, but was in the Korean clans, namely Strike up until this point. This frag video would make him an extremely popular player. Just a week or so later, a huge moment related to this happens in the competitive community. On February 8th, 2008, the clan Forever, who you may remember from the last tournament as the Korean players, are the first ever clan to get a 200 win streak on ijji. This streak would continue up to 204 clan war wins. I hate to do this, but this does come with some asterisks. My proof for the date in this event is this thread on GunZFactor made by the leader of the Forever clan himself, Gosu. Keep in mind, the name Gosu in 2025 has taken on quite a few different owners. Similar to how in the start of this video, there have been a few iterations of Kraise at this point, the same is true of the username Gosu. This streak, while extraordinarily impressive and worth mentioning in history as the first ever 200 streak, did take advantage of some glitches. There was a glitch in Clan War at the time, where if you got a 2-0 lead on the other team and you left the Clan War, the match would still count as a win for you. So typically you'd need to win 4 rounds to confirm a Clan War win, but according to posts in this thread and my memory at the time, Forever was abusing this glitch and leaving whenever they went up 2-0. Gosu would defend himself in this thread and call everyone jealous haters, you know, as you do. But I mean, I kind of understand where everyone's coming from. Don't abuse a glitch that fucks with the game's integrity is how I feel, personally. Some other users were also accusing Forever of dodging clan wars. The way the matchmaking system worked for clan wars is you could actually see the name of the other clans that were searching for a match. So if you saw a good clan, you could just cancel matchmaking and quote-unquote dodge them. This was super common as there wasn't skill-based matchmaking in the game, but very uncommon for a top team like Forever. They were likely attempting to get the highest streak ever. By the way, does anyone know what the first ever 100 streak was? I definitely don't remember it, and for whatever reason I knew how to find this 200 streak because I just remember it being big drama in the community at the time. The 2-0 lead glitch would eventually be patched, by the way, but yeah, just another classic GunZ glitch that I felt was worth mentioning. The next update would be a rough one, boys. February 13th, 2008, gamble boxes were officially added to the ijji shop. Open a gamble box, get a random premium item prize. This would be the first time the Pioneer was introduced into the game, a shotgun with a 6-round clip, whereas every other shotgun to this point would be a 5-round clip before needing to reload. It might not sound like much, but that one shot is huge. Of course, because of this gun would become the newest best in slot gun, hidden behind a completely random gamble pay-to-win mechanic. All the way back in early 2008, these guys were ahead of their time with the scumminess. The one nice thing about this update also added was the free-to-earn gamble boxes you could buy with in-game bounty, which did release a few new items that would ever so slightly save us some money. The most notable of these items would be the Shura. It was the level 60 sword that became best in slot for swords, and we didn't even have to pay any real money. Imagine that. I couldn't find the exact date the Shura was added to these boxes, but it had to have been shortly after this, as replays within a few months start having players using the Shura. Well, it's been another 3 months, so here we are, the spring of 2008 ijji GunZ tournament. A few interesting things happened in this tournament. For one, this was the beginning of what we'll call twin name meta. To explain this quickly, remember the lead shotting ping thing I mentioned way back near the start of this video? Depending on your ping to a player, you need to lead a certain amount. Now what if when you were fighting the enemy team that had a player that had 30 ping, one with 50 ping, one with 80, and one with 150? What you'd typically do is start memorizing their usernames and their associated pings and then fight them appropriately. You would usually try to target the lowest ping player as your shots were more likely to hit them and so on and so forth. Well, what if every player on the other team had the exact same fucking username and armor on so you could never actually differentiate who's who? Welcome to the new GunZ meta. It's a living hell. This tournament, users figured out that if everyone wears that same armor and has a similar looking username, it's an insane advantage. So every single competitive team in this tournament did this. This sucked as a viewer too, man. All the players lost their identities. Even in the replays, you can't tell who's who. Oh, and by the way, just one more change for this tournament. We're at 32 teams now, no longer 16. Because of the twin names, gathering info of a lot of player names was quite a bit harder for this section, but I think I did okay given the circumstances. The champions of the previous tournament, Basic, would not participate as a clan. The Korean team played under the clan Forever again this tournament, and they do much better than losing in the first round. They get as far as the quarterfinals before facing off against Sparta, who was once again a heavy favorite to take it all home. The team who beat Forever and second place team last tournament, Back to Basics, would find themselves in the quarterfinals of this tournament as well, but against a new clan that we haven't discussed yet. Mutuality has entered the chat. These Mutuality players were tough to identify because of the twin name thing. I can for sure confirm 2 of these players though. I hadn't mentioned it previously, but another clan who had been an S tier clan of their own through pretty much all of ijji history to this point was a clan named Solar. Solar's leader was Venom, who would be playing in this lineup with another former clanmate, Purple Duck. Purple Duck was an Australian player, meaning he had very high ping to Americans, requiring a huge amount of leading. This twin name meta, mixed with a huge ping variance on this team, made them a real pain in the ass to deal with. So basically, while I know Venom and Purple Duck would play for Mutuality, I have no idea who these other 2 illustrations are. A very common way to do the twin name would be to interchange lowercase L's and capital I's as they look identical with the in-game text. So as great as it would be for Sparta to get the revenge on Back to Basics in the finals of this tournament, I would have never spent all that time explaining the Solar Mutuality connection if that were the case. Mutuality would be moving on to the finals this time, eliminating Back to Basics, who barely fall short again. Sparta would end up beating the Korean clan Forever this tournament and find themselves in the finals as well. Sparta would be fielding a different lineup this time around from the previous tournament. Here's the changes. Yang and Shot remained in the Sparta lineup, but they picked up a player who ran with the Korean clan Strike previously, Rain, or Rain L. Rain was a great player for the Korean clans in his own right, just not in Strike or Forever's tournament lineups previously. And remember when I said Basic didn't compete as a clan this time around? Well, that didn't stop Omega from going back to back. Omega teamed up with Sparta this tournament, becoming the 4th member of the new championship team. What a fun few months that guy had, I bet. Finally, after a 4-month period of dominating the Clan War server and a heartbreaking defeat and sudden death in the previous tournament, Sparta would be crowned Champions of GunZ in spring of 2008. They would beat Mutuality at town 10-8. And just like that, another tournament is behind us. April 4th, 2008, just a week or so after the tournament ended, is where we're heading next. I haven't actually mentioned them yet, but there's a clan named Magicians who were a great S-tier European clan from the start of ijji until this point. They've participated in, I think, every single tournament, led by a great player, Flamekiller. The reason I'm bringing up Magicians now is that they actually had an incredible clan war streak. I think anything over 100 wins in a row is a great achievement, and I can only really remember 3 or 4 moments in time where that happens. So I think this is totally worth mentioning. On April 4th, Magicians went on an insane 161 clan war streak. This screenshot showing the player Fantagram is actually a Flamekiller playing on an alternate character. While this isn't as big as Forever's previous streak, I didn't find any associated complaining about dodging or glitch abuse or anything. So yeah, definitely think it was worth mentioning, even if this was not the highest streak to this point. About a month later, on May 7th, 2008, we would get some item shop updates, both the free item shop with bounty and the pay-to-win item shop. The best in slot shotgun, Pioneer, would be removed from gamble boxes and added to the regular shop. Imagine you spent like $100 or whatever trying to get this damn thing through the gamble boxes, and then 3 months later, they just make it so you can plop down $10 and then have it for 90 days or whatever. How frustrating. These guys were wild with their pay-to-win mechanics, man. The less frustrating part of this update is for the first time in GunZ history, new bounty items were added to the shop. Prior to this, the only items that were available for purchase with bounty were the same items going all the way back to the launch of iGunZ in 2005. They added new level 40 and level 60 armor into the free-to-play lucky boxes, which had the best stats for free-to-play players at this point, and forever on, I believe they wouldn't release any other higher level equipment through these gamble boxes. It's very possible this is when the Shura was added to the shop as well. There were a few other items released, but that's what was notable in my memory. I think there was a rocket, maybe a dagger, not 100% sure. At some point shortly after this, the first date on archive.org is May 23rd, 2008. The item of the day was released in the pay-to-win item shop. This was met with very mixed reactions from the community. Although it was a different time and we were used to the pay-to-win, obviously, I'm not exactly sure if this is a net positive or a net negative for the community still to this day. The item of the day worked like this. They would take an item that was typically limited duration. Remember Deities, Battle Brood, Prime Meds, you know, all the stuff players actually wanted and couldn't have forever? They would then sell those items for an unlimited duration for the first time ever. Hike the price way the fuck up and then put in a limited quantity of them to add that FOMO effect. These guys' monetization strategies were so far ahead of their time, dude, my lord. For example, if the full Battle Brood set was usually $9 for 180 days or whatever I said earlier, then they would put it up as item of the day and make it $30 and it lasts forever, and then only allow 100 or so players to actually purchase that. Just casually pulling in like a guaranteed extra $3,000 of 2008 money every single day, no big deal. It wasn't this exact strategy every time. Sometimes they would genuinely just have a discount as item of the day, but more times than not, the unlimited duration FOMO stuff was what they were going for. Let's try to move on to something a little more fun. July 11th, 2008, the Ocean Rap releases. This was such a hype moment in the community because this was like the first actually produced studio type GunZ song or rap that was ever created. Probably still is the only one too. It's most certainly showing its age, but it sampled the song Two Step by DJ Unk for its beat, and basically it's just a homage to the entire history of the Ocean clan. While a lot of the players mentioned in the rap were actually gone out of Ocean at this point, it was more of just shouting out the legendary players of the clan's past. This was insanely hype on GunZFactor, just because like, why was someone going in the studio to go on half step, now reload with it, reload. Okay, I'm done. Like I said, it definitely isn't aging great, but neither is actual popular rap from that time either. So yeah, shit was fire. Shout out to Ryoshi, an OG Ocean member, for making and releasing this shit for all of us back then. It still sticks with me now to this day as kind of a meme. 4 days after the Ocean rap, we got another piece of history that is also outside of the game itself, which, like, what a hype week we were having back in July 2008, man. As I mentioned previously, ijji would occasionally hold events like Vote for Your Favorite Clan contest or the Gun Cinema contest. The contest they did this summer was the ijji question event. They asked users simple questions like, what is your favorite moment on ijji, or other crap like that. And frankly, just what an awful event. Like, what even is this? The reason I'm even bringing this up is because there was a legendary video that spawned from this event. Trolling wasn't nearly as advanced as it is now. Obviously, trolls have been gaining power under bridges for decades at this point. This, however, was a pretty solid troll. There was a rather infamous player known as Jaya Holy or 619 Destiny. He was mostly famously known for gifting players way better than him premium items in order for them to play with him. And you know, purchasing hacks, this guy's pockets must have been deep. I was like 14 in 2008, bro. Damn. So 619 uploaded his answers to the ijji question event, except it wasn't 619. It was someone in an ugly Halloween mask just trolling the life out of this dude. For example, 619's favorite moment was when he purchased an aimbot from a hacker.
When I bought the aimbot from Scary Monster, it was only 200 bucks. You know, I felt like a pro. You know, I could actually aim for once in my life. So, I mean, maybe if you know, start paying some people, maybe that'd be nice. Be like, I'll give you $5. Just be nice, you know what I'm saying? Or you could do a big like me and be like, I'll give you 2,000. Just be nice, you know what I'm saying? Shit, I don't even know. Oh, like that one time, I finally beat one kill we lead. It was so close, 4-3, man. I was like, holy shit. I ain't posting on GunZFactor though, cause you know I ain't trying to do all that to them.
There's not much to talk about here. It is a 1-minute video after all, but it's just something that stuck with me after all these years, just like the ocean wrap. July 27th, 2008, the 4th official ijji Clan War tournament takes place. This tournament, format-wise, is very similar to the last. Once again, we have a 32-team bracket, and once again, we have twin name meta. Same as last tournament, and arguably even worse, it's very hard to parse out who is actually playing for who, due to everyone having similar usernames, but I'll do my best. For whatever reason, Sparta actually sat this tournament out. After talking around, it was likely just due to real-life conflicts stopping some of the core members from being able to participate for this month. The Korean team that always does great and was playing under Forever in the last few tournaments returned to the clan Strike for this tournament. The same clan who won the first ever tournament less than a year ago. The biggest favorites of this tournament, though, were likely the Elemental clan, fielding Omega, the back-to-back tournament winner, as their leader, Energy, the former player from Standard from the first tournament and a fantastic European player, Venom, as previously mentioned, as the leader of Solar, and Gosu. This was a stacked lineup, and I don't think anyone in the world saw them losing this. Omega literally pulled together an all-star lineup while Sparta sat this one out. Because Gosu was running with Elemental this tournament, I believe this is why the other great Korean players went back to Strike as opposed to playing under the Forever banner this tournament. Elemental would breeze through the first round of this tournament, but would face a familiar name in the second round: Ocean. Ocean at this point wasn't really the Ocean from the year prior. Sparta had formed, fracturing their original clan's base, and while Alinda did rejoin the leader of Ocean, Lemonade, for this tournament, pretty much all the other members were different. Hell, they were down so bad in March of this year that they had added my new bass to the clan, giving me my first ever position in a decent clan at this point. Weirdly enough, you'd think I remember this tournament super well, being involved with such a good clan, but I struggled remembering this tournament more than any other prior to this point. The lineup of Lemonade, Alinda, Sailgun, and an unknown twin name person, some way, somehow, upset the tournament favorites, Elemental, against all odds. The match where they'd upset Elemental took place at Prison, which was controversial in its own right. The map Prison is a campfest in general. It has tiny narrow hallways and just doesn't allow for the best expression of gameplay due to its insanely tight quarters. Because of this map, Elementals actually opted to bring a rocket or two into this match, which, according to Energy, likely cost them this match, and no one really practices with rockets, but clearly at the time they thought this was going to be the move to deal with potential camping. This happened a lot in tournament matches at Prison. One team would get a 1-round lead and then they'd camp in their base because getting through the tight quarters is damn near impossible, if not certain death. Elemental would be eliminated and Ocean would find themselves in the finals against the previously mentioned Korean clan, Strike. The Ocean lineup of Lemonade, Alinda, Sailgun, and the unknown fourth would go on to face off against the Koreans, also in twin names of course. Through talking with community members and process of elimination, I think Strike's lineup this time around would have been Dramatic, Genre, Rain, and Scream. It's possible that Horror, the former Strike and Sparta member, was playing for Strike this tournament as well in place of either Rain or Scream, but because of twin names, I really just can't be sure. While the details of this finals match are lost to time, we do know that Strike would win and become the first ever 2-time tournament winner. Honestly, these Korean guys were way better than I remember, and I remember them being pretty damn good. Props and congrats to Strike, again, another tournament down. On August 26, 2008, Quest Mode had a huge expansion, adding 6 additional bosses into the game. With all other large expansions to Quest Mode, a new map was available, but not this time. Mansion would receive 4 new bosses, and Dungeon and Prison would get 1 each. First, one of the OG bosses, the Goblin King, would now have 3 variants added to the game. Fake Goblin King, Dwarf Goblin King, and Thunder Goblin King. Gotta say, they went real low effort on these models. They're all just recolors and size changes of the original Goblin King. The Fake Goblin King was essentially just a lower HP version of the actual Goblin King, who would give you a little bit less XP and bounty when defeating him. The summon items are what made Fake Goblin King great though. The items to summon Fake Goblin King were fairly common, so you could always find someone with the consumables or you'd have them yourself. This greatly increased EXP per hour overall, and if I'm not mistaken, it did become the meta for getting XP for questers. We actually haven't checked in on the EXP high scores in a really long time at this point, so let's just take a peek at how these guys are doing in the top rankings. On August 31st, so just a few days after this update, we are in full-on questers dominate the highest level players on the leaderboard, and it's not even close. The previously mentioned Convict99 is now the game's #1 player, and he spent a lot of time at that point in the previous year or so since we checked on this. The only other notable name on here that I think is worth mentioning is Bloodthirst 2, and we'll cover why later on in history. I do think it's crazy that Bloodthirst is ranked 17th on here, but has the most kills on the entire list by a pretty significant amount. I don't think Bloodthirst was uniquely as a quester. I think he was more of a deathmatch player, and he just played a lot, and maybe he did both. I'm not exactly sure. That's all for the rankings. Just wanted to give you guys a quick peek at that while we were talking about questing. Back to the quest mode update. These 3 new Goblin King variants drop 2 equip items, just the same as every boss in the game at this point. Here they are. The Fake Goblin King would drop the Goblin Commander's Club and the Goblin Wizard's Arm Guards. Thunder Goblin King dropped the Golden Goblin Launcher and the Golden Goblin Hat. The Dwarf Goblin King dropped the Golden Goblin Commander's Club and the Golden Goblin Wizard's Arm Guards. As you can see, Thunder and Dwarf Goblin King dropped golden variants of the existing equips that were already droppable by other Goblin bosses. These items were identical, but with a gold skin and slightly better stats. Along with this update, 3 more bosses were added to the game, that being the Palmpo bosses. During any quest, you'd have a 1% chance at a rare mini Palmpo, which are these cute little guys spawning in your quest lobby. This NPC was completely immune to melee damage and would drop a consumable to spawn the first of the 3 Palmpo bosses 100% of the time. Occasionally, the mini Palmpo would spawn during a boss stage or something, and you'd end up not actually having enough ammo to kill it, causing everyone to have to leave the room since it was immune to melee damage. Once you got lucky enough for the baby Palmpo to spawn, you'd be guaranteed at least 2 new boss encounters after this, assuming you finish your quest. The first boss fight would be the Palmpo Commander at Mansion. This was definitely the easiest of the Palmpo bosses, but I gotta say, I remember these quests just being pretty hard compared to the other bosses in general. I don't know if it was a visual glitch or if their attacks were supposed to be invisible, but the Palmpos basically threw invisible ranged attacks at you that would kill you if you stood still. It really sucked. The Palmpo Commander would be the first boss in the game to not drop any equipable items. It would only drop a consumable that would allow you to fight the next Palmpo boss. This boss was just named Palmpo, straight up, and it was fought in the prison map. This boss did in fact have equips it could drop, but it also had a chance to drop a rare consumable to let you fight the rarest boss in the game, the Cursed Palmpo, at Dungeon. The Palmpo boss dropped the Palmpo Launcher and the Palmpo Shirt, while the Cursed Palmpo would drop the Palmpo's Ice Blade, which was a katana, or the Palmpo Helmet. I'm sick of saying that word. These items would be some of the rarest to see around, just because you only have a 1% chance to see a Palmpo in the first place, and then you gotta get lucky another time to get that second consumable. Pretty solid update all around for quests, and these would be the final bosses added to the traditional quest mode in GunZ History, although not the end of PvE updates in GunZ. September 10th, 2008, the first new map dating all the way back to the release of Stairway in the ijji Beta nearly 2 years prior is released. This map is called High Haven. High Haven ended up being a pretty popular map, honestly. Definitely the most popular of the maps that were added to the game after ijji's release. This map was actually designed by a player during an event ijji held, which was a create a map contest. I believe all the maps added post-release were event winners. Look at these lazy bastards crowdsourcing us. In the bottom right of this YouTube video uploaded by ijji, they credit someone named Alvin Quach, who I'm assuming is a player who designed the map. I remember a runner-up map being GunSmart. Everyone was pretty stoked on that one, and it was like a grocery store map, but ultimately High Haven would win and would be added to the game. Nice to get some non-quest or non-item shop content added to the game after so many years. Next up is the 2008 Autumn Clan War Tournament. Guess who's back? Yeah, that's right. Sparta, and they're once again the heavy favorites to take this one home. The format of this tournament was identical to the previous one, and once again we are still in twin name meta, so gathering who played against who in these matches is difficult, but let's work it out. The final 4 of this tournament were the exact teams that you'd expect based on the 32 team bracket. Because Sparta is back, so is Omega in their lineup, so no more Elemental Clan this tournament. The Koreans are back too, this time under a completely new clan name. No more Strike, no more Forever. This time they're playing under the Genre clan name, even though they had a player named Genre, which is a little confusing for sure. The other two clans who made the Final Four this tournament were Heroics and Solar. We previously talked about Solar. This was Venom's clan, and he'd be back after previously playing with Mutuality a few tournaments ago and with Omega and Elementals last tournament. The last clan, Heroics, is a clan we haven't mentioned yet, but they've been around since the very start of ijji and have been an S-tier clan themselves. Remember Back to Basics from a few tournaments ago? How they were a great clan who could just never really get over the hump? I feel like Heroics was in the same boat. They were like the North American version of Back to Basics when it came to tournament success. Always up there, but just never the best. Speaking of Back to Basics, they've been participating in all these tournaments prior to this point, and they just haven't been able to repeat their early ijji success. Heroics, however, has been deep in the past few tournaments, and found themselves in the Final Four this time against Genre. That leaves Sparta facing off against Solar in their semifinals. Because of a twin name meta, everyone in this game is named FT on both teams. What a time to be alive. Sparta ultimately would beat Solar and would be heading to the finals as the favorites. Genre was facing off with Heroics, where they would also advance, setting up one of the most hyped finals in GunZ history, Sparta against Genre, aka the Koreans. While Sparta had defeated the Koreans 2 tournaments ago under the Forever banner, this would be the first time these two dominant clans faced off in the finals. Sparta would be fielding nearly the same lineup as their first tournament win nearly 6 months ago prior. However, they did make one change. Their new lineup was Yang, Shot, Omega, and they welcomed Horror back to the team. If you remember, Horror was on the first Sparta team that lost to Back to Basics and Sudden Death during the second ijji tournament. The fourth player who played with Sparta during their last tournament win, Rain, was actually playing for the Korean team this time around. At least, I'm pretty sure. You know, the twin names and all. The Korean lineup, through process of elimination, I believe was Gosu, Dramatic, Genre, and Rain. Ultimately, after a pretty fast-paced game at town where Genre decided to bring a rocket into the tournament match, what's up with people deciding tournament is the time to try out rockets? Sparta would take the win, winning their second tournament. This was back-to-back tournaments for Sparta if you consider they didn't actually participate in the prior tournament. And this is a third tournament championship for Omega, who at this point you have to say likely is the best player by raw success in the game's history up until this point. One more special thing about this tournament win is it's the first ever tournament where the crown item was added to the game, making Yang, Shot, Omega, and Horror the only players in the game with the item at this point. They did not go back and give these crowns retroactively to previous tournament winners, but they would give them out in all future tournaments going forward. Moving on to the next point in the timeline, let's go to December 17th, 2008. Over 2 years after the release at this point, we get our first change to the competitive map rotation in Clan Wars. This didn't happen very often at all, as you can see. ijji would add 2 maps to the rotation, being Factory and the somewhat new at this point map, High Haven. Both of these maps would go on to be staples within the competitive scene. Factory maybe a little bit more than High Haven. This update also released 2 new noteworthy weapons into the free gamble boxes you could buy with Bounty. With this update, we were given the Cruelazon Limited and the Breaker 9P. The Cruelazon Limited was basically just a white version of the Cruelazon that you would get for 7 days. All items that you pull from these boxes were for 7 days, by the way. Keep in mind the Pioneer had already come out at this time, so no one was really buying the regular Cruelazon for the competitive advantage at this point. The Breaker 9P was stat identical to the Breaker 8, so you could now, in a way, have 2 Breaker 8s. While the Pioneer was still better due to its extra shot in the clip, this would help narrow the gap a little bit between pay to win and free to play. That's pretty much it for this update, quick and easy. The final update of the year of 2008 happened on December 29th. The next few updates are all competitive/tournament centric. I will say we are slowly leaving the golden era because content updates in general have just dropped off a cliff for GunZ at this point. In the background, separate from GunZ, MAIET, which was already a tiny development studio to begin with, had been splitting their duties between multiple games at this point. GunZ was the cash cow that allowed them to develop new games like GunZ 2 and Raiders. Because of this, content starts slowly falling off, and the golden era starts looking, well, not so golden within these next few months. Anyways, December 29th, we actually got a great competitive change, and that's after 3 awful tournaments of twin name meta, they would no longer be allowed in future tournaments. ijji would enforce a no twin name outside of the tournament matches, so you could still use this tactic for qualifying, and over the years, some certainly would, but ultimately it would slowly fall off. Because they banned twin names, they would offer free name changes to anyone whose character contained twin names prior to the tournament matches. GM Xander would announce this on the forums on the 29th as, starting on January 1st, 2009, the first tournament of 2009's qualifying would begin. And that's a wrap on 2008. Let's head to 09. January 24th, 2009, the 6th ijji tournament finals take place, but no champion was crowned. Let's check out what went on in this tournament because it is a juicy one. As it's been mentioned a few times, GunZ has been full of drama, cheats, hacks, and various exploits throughout its history. I've left a lot of them out of the history because I just didn't find them significant enough to mention, and besides, who wants to shine a light on filth? Let's just keep it in the dark, you know? In the interest of time, I'm just going to be talking about the finals matchup, as it was by far the most significant thing to happen in this tournament. You might remember the last tournament, I mentioned a new clan that I hadn't discussed to this point, Heroics. Spoiler alert, but that was tactical, as they would face off with Sparta in the most drama-filled tournament finals in GunZ history. Sparta's lineup still had their core 3 players this tournament, Yang, Shot, and Omega, but they would add a familiar face in favor of Horror this time around. They would add Venom, the former leader of Solar. This would be the first time that the Sparta lineup didn't contain one of the great Korean players from Strike, Forever, etc. In fact, this would also be the first tournament the Koreans didn't participate in any regard. I'm unsure why. Heroics lineup would consist of players who we haven't discussed to this point, but were great players in their own right. Their lineup would be ASDF, U-Hawk, Amazon, and Shotgun. Shotgun, I'm about 80% sure, because they had kept their old twin name and not their original username. It was okay for one player to have that old twin name because nobody else was matching him anymore, if that makes sense. So the finals are set. Sparta is looking for their first true back-to-back tournament win, and Heroics is looking for the upset of a lifetime after reaching the finals for the first time ever. Heroics, shockingly, would take down Sparta in these tournament finals, but there's so much more to say than that. Heroics, while they did win the game, may have not, how do I say this kindly? Yeah, they fucking cheated, dude. I'm doing my best to keep this entire video objective and without too much opinion, so here it is from the GM himself, GM Xander. I'll summarize this bit, but it's on screen. In a post on January 28th, 2009, Xander says that they confirmed that some of the players in Sparta had their internet service attacked, or a DDoS attack. This was 2009 after all, not as common knowledge as it is now. These two players were Yang and Venom, who repeatedly were being disconnected and were unable to play fairly during the initial finals match, effectively making it a 2 vs 4. Because of the confirmed DDoS attacks, the admins felt it was necessary to hold a rematch at a secret date and time to avoid more DDoSing. They also stated that although a new date and time had been agreed upon by both parties, that Heroics would be unwilling to participate unless the map was Prison 2? Why in the actual fuck would they want Prison 2, man? That's wild. No one likes that shit. I needed to know why the rematch would be taking place on Prison 2, so I did some digging and managed to find someone with a personal first-hand account of the situation. I present to you Yang, the leader of Sparta.
It started with the ijji Game Masters acknowledging that there was suspicious activity that occurred during the finals. After a few days of forum petitioning and overwhelming support from the community, the Game Masters decided to approve our rematch request. The rematch was originally set to be played in town, since that is where the DDoSing occurred. Both parties had agreed on the map pool initially, but Amazon decided to retract that offer at the last minute and instead wanted to play against us on Prison 2 for 2 sets. I remember that this dialogue exchange frustrated the GMs at the time, particularly GM Xander, who actually wanted to see a proper repeat of the finals that should have happened on that day. Unfortunately, Amazon wouldn't budge and was essentially holding the rematch hostage unless Sparta agreed to the exact time, date, and map pool that they wanted for the rematch.
The admins also stated that if both teams hadn't agreed to a rematch, that Heroics would not have been crowned champions, as it would make all future Clan War tournaments lack integrity, and that's just not a route they wanted to go down. I fully respect that. One more strange thing is that it seems the finals was a best of 3, where that doesn't seem to be originally announced anywhere whatsoever, but this seems to be the first ever best of 3 tournament match. I'm unsure of the circumstances of how that came about, but there was no mention of it in any of the archive threads that I could find. It does appear that this was the plan even prior to the DDoS attacks, that it was going to be a best out of 3. I'm gonna let you in on a secret. The secret date of the rematch would be February 7th, 2009. So I'd say the first ever tournament match being thrown out and rescheduled was pretty big in history, but something happened between January 28th and February 7th, 2009. Sparta, while staying warmed up for their upcoming super secret rematch on February 7th, managed to break a huge GunZ record. I'd say they were pretty motivated at this point, considering they put up a massive 230 Clan War streak, and this stands as the longest Clan War record to this day. That is a lot of wins in a row. This took place on February 5th, just 2 days before their rematch. You'll remember last year that the Clan Forever had a 204 streak. However, they got the streak during a time where there was a 2-0 glitch, meaning you could leave with a 2-0 lead and still get credited with the win. And there was a little drama on whether or not they were dodging the good teams. Sparta had neither of those crutches and still smashed the record anyway. They were locked the fuck in for this tournament rematch. Ultimately, Sparta would show up on Prison 2, and, well, Heroics dropped the soap for roughly 22 rounds and Sparta went to work, absolutely dominating them. The only screenshot that still exists from this is Sparta winning 10-1 in Game 3. It's Game 3 because you'll remember this was the first ever best of 3 Claymore tournament. Getting that revenge after all the drama and bullshit and winning that hard on a map like Prison must have felt great.
Karmic justice, no other way to phrase it. Heroics lit a fire under us, and as a warm-up in the 2 weeks leading up to the match, we actually went ahead and set the highest clan war streak in GunZ history at 230 wins. So you could say we were motivated, to say the least.
I'd really love it if that replay were out there somewhere. Given the stakes and context, I'd like to see how those first few rounds played out with my own 2 eyes. I'd bet it was stressful.
Looking back, it made sense why Heroics were pushing the rematch to be on a map they could camp and cheese on. If you were to ask Amazon or read through enough YouTube comments scattered around GunZ videos relating to Sparta, there will always be some narrative that the outcome would have been different under various circumstances. It doesn't change the fact that we won in a convincing fashion under every agreed upon term selected by them. Heroics may have set the tone for the match, but Sparta set the bar.
There were a few other weird things that happened, but I didn't feel they were worth mentioning given the stakes and insanity of this finals match. This would give Sparta their 3rd tournament victory in 4 attempts, the first ever clan to win 3 tournaments, and certainly breaking a tie with Strike as the most successful clan in GunZ history. One other significant thing to come of this tournament though is that this is the first tournament where Sparta would wear this exact set, which would be deemed Sparta set by the community. This armor set was the best combination of stats, weight, and not having a giant flowy coat that makes you stick out too much. You'll still see people wearing Sparta set today. Real life influencers, those guys. I want to take this moment to remind you guys that we are leaving the golden era of GunZ. Content has slowed down on the developer side, but the host of the game, ijji, were still supporting the game the best they could. Peak player counts steadily lowered from this time period until the end, as content releases became more infrequent. And I remind you this because the next point on the timeline is, well, another Clan War tournament. Up until this point, I've had pretty much picture-perfect accurate dates for everything, but at this point it gets much harder as archive.org didn't capture the ijji website for giant swaths at a time. So for this tournament, I can only tell you that it was at the end of April in 2009 when the finals took place. I also can't see who won and lost every single match like I could with the previous tournaments, but thankfully I was able to find a screenshot of the spring 2009 bracket. Please keep in mind this is someone's guessed bracket, not the actual results of the tournament, but it's helpful so we can actually know which clans at least participated. You'll see some familiar names from this tournament. The 2 previous finals contenders, Sparta and Heroics, are here, Mutuality has reappeared, Magicians are here, Harsh has a strong lineup, and the Korean team have returned for this tournament under a new name. Raza would participate with some combination of the Korean players that we previously mentioned in 2007 and 2008. I wanted to mention this because they would stay under this banner for pretty much the rest of their time playing GunZ, which honestly, thank God, because I was sick of trying to keep track of what clan they were playing in. While we don't know the particular results of each matchup, I do know this. The guy who predicted this bracket at least did something right, because the finals of this tournament would end up being Sparta versus Magicians. Sparta, for the first time in their history, would field the exact same lineup back-to-back that won the previous tournament, that being Yang, Shot, Omega, and Venom. Magicians, while they've been briefly mentioned, had never been to a tournament finals, but they maintained being an S-tier clan all the way back to the inception of ijji GunZ. They've been remarkably consistent and always known as one of the best European clans. Their tournament lineup this time around was their leader, Flamekiller, Sorrow, otherwise known as Kimizaru, Tweety, and Moonsun. That bracket that I used as a way of proof for who actually played in this tournament? Yeah, that was actually Flamekiller's bracket. I found the info for this tournament on the old Magicians Clan forums, which are somehow still up today. Shout out to you, Flamekiller. Thankfully, GunZ Memories on YouTube has uploaded these finals, and through digging through GunZ Memories, I'm confirmed that these finals were also a best of 3 on multiple maps. But the previous rounds of the tournament were still a best of 20 on a single map. These final matches, and in tournaments going forward at this point I believe, would become a best of 3 series, played to a best of 10 rather than a best of 20. I like this format more, and I think it's more fair personally. The full replay of Game 1 is uploaded to YouTube. Sparta would win 6-3 on Battle Arena. The next match would take place on High Haven, which, as far as I know, this is the first tournament match that I've seen on High Haven, but maybe it was used earlier in this tournament. It was still relatively a new map after all. This replay is unfortunately not complete and ends mid-match, however I was able to gather a screenshot from a first-hand source as to what the result of this match would be. Sparta would do it again, beating the star-studded European lineup 5-3 in a close match to take home their 3rd championship in a row, 4th out of 5 attempts, and just solidifying this lineup as some of the best players in GunZ history. Magicians, after getting to their first finals, would of course be let down, but let me tell you, that would not deter them. Man, this was a drama-free tournament. Good stuff. But this is GunZ, so let's discuss some of the most important drama that still haunts this game to this day. I want to talk about underclocking, overclocking, and how it slowly infected and destroyed the integrity of this game from this point on. Buckle in. If you're a PC gamer, you're likely familiar with the term underclock, or overclock, or both. In GunZ, because of the absolute mess of spaghetti that this game was founded on, you know, the entire popularized combat system being an entire glitch, actual peer-to-peer networking, hacks where people can just straight up delete your character from the lobby, I can go on and on. Underclocking and overclocking mean something different than what you may be thinking. Back in earlier mid-2009, when this exploit of the game started popping up, no one really understood it except for the exploiters themselves. In fact, I still don't fully understand how this works, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain it anyway. Underclocking, at least back in 2009 when this was popularized, was the much more common exploit that people were using, rather than overclocking. For whatever reason, if you underclocked your processor and then played GunZ, the entire engine of the game would process your actions completely differently. When the clock speed of the game is lowered, your actions would appear slower to your enemy, and I'm assuming the person cheating as well, although like I said, I don't fully understand this. At first, this doesn't really sound like an advantage, but for one, you get used to aiming at players who are moving at roughly the same speed. Like when someone dashes to the left, you know exactly where their dash will land, so you can plan to shoot them after their action. With underclock, because the animation or action was slower, it would just mess up your game timing. A lot of players who use this exploit would be noticed to be quote-unquote floating. Like, their character just had a little extra gravity on them. This alone is annoying, but I wouldn't say it's a game-breaking exploit or anything. But what really broke the game is, for whatever reason, the underclocking of your processor made it so the peer-to-peer network connection suddenly worked to your advantage. We've talked about it previously, but lead-shotting your opponents was a regular thing. Anyone who didn't live within a few hundred miles of each other would need to predict their opponent's next move due to the crappy netcode. When you underclock, for some reason, you don't need to lead shot nearly as much, or at all, depending on your opponent's ping. I'm not sure why changing your processor's clock speed affects the netcode like this, and I'm sure someone more educated in the comments is already writing up a better explanation, but that's what it felt like as a player at least. Suddenly, players you've never even heard of were hitting harder than any player you've ever faced. Under and overclocking in GunZ is like a spectrum, and not the one that most of us are on. If you underclock or overclock to a great extent, your character model starts freaking out. Like I said, you'd see players float around and it was just super obvious that they were cheating. But some cheaters would realize if you underclock just a tiny bit, your character model would basically appear identical to someone who's not cheating while still giving you that network advantage in game. Because this wasn't an obvious exploit or cheat like, you know, Gob mode or something that's easily provable, people got away with cheating like this and literally still do in this game to this day. Let's talk about underclocking's counterpart, overclocking, for a little bit. For reasons I'll touch on in a few years timeline-wise, underclocking did eventually become a bit obsolete to the losers who want to cheat in this game because they're just not good enough to hang. Unfortunately, future circumstances led to those same cheaters now abusing overclocking, which had different effects in game than underclocking as previously described. Essentially, rather than your character appearing floaty on a spectrum, overclockers would have their movements sped up on a spectrum. Now, I'm not a dirty little snake, so I don't know if that means that they can physically do K-style animation cancels faster, thus leading to more actions per minute, or if it just makes the character model appear faster to opponents. But what I do know is that this is still widely abused to this day, and a problem that GunZ has and likely always will face. While I don't think it's important to keep delving into the technical aspects of this cheat or exploit or whatever you want to call it, I do think it's important to touch on the impact that it had in this game. I timelined this at this very point, in early to mid 2009, as this is when the exploit became most common. And ultimately, beyond this point, I was just super unsure of who was actually legitimately coming into their primes and playing amazing versus who was just cheating to reach new heights. And a lot of us players struggled with that. For one, a player by the name of Felony basically released a guide on GunZFactor for anyone who wanted to underclock and abuse this exploit. I believe the post on GunZFactor is lost to time, but if someone could find that, that would be amazing. What I did find was a post from February 2009 asking for Felony to be banned with a little petition starting. Calling the exploit lagging his CPU or aimbot or whatever the fuck basically sums it up as a legit GunZ player. Like, I don't fully quite understand how that dude is cheating, but god damn if he ain't cheating. By the way, this isn't just like opening up your gaming software and hitting the underclock button on your PC. You typically need to go into your BIOS if I'm correct and change your front side bus speed, which is not recommended by most MOBA manufacturers as it comes with some risks. This was also 2009 when basically everyone was on some shitty $300 HP laptop that just couldn't do these things. Some people even figured out how to drop the game's clock speed with Cheat Engine, a popular gaming exploit tool. I do remember that going around as well, not even requiring you to mess with your hardware at all but still getting the same effects in game. Additionally, at this time, actually before the previous tournament we talked about, the GMs of ijji acknowledged the existence of underclocking in-game as a glitch or exploit and stated anyone using it in a tournament would not be allowed to play. I genuinely think that nobody actually abused underclock during this previous tournament, as the method to do so was still not publicly known within the community, or those who did were so trash that they didn't make any waves and Sparta still reigned supreme in this tournament. The same couldn't be said for the next point on the timeline, that being the summer of 2009 tournament, where I feel like the integrity of competitive play on GunZ began to crumble. A lot of things past the spring of 2009 are going to be lost media, and lost to time at this point, especially exact dates. For a lot of this research, I used the homepage of the GunZ website to capture things like tournament dates, update release dates, shop updates, you know, basically everything we've been talking about. Unfortunately, after spring of 2009, ijji added this splash page to the GunZ website, which cannot be bypassed and makes it so that the homepage of GunZ website would never be viewable via archive.org past this date again. It's a real bummer, but thankfully I've been able to get a lot of things corroborated via word of mouth in the community, old GunZFactor posts, and old ijji forum posts. So yeah, just wanted to point out that this video gets a little bit less precise after this point. While I couldn't find any of the summer 2009 tournament's full results or bracket, I do remember the key storylines from this tournament. For one, of course, Sparta were the heavy favorites to win again at this point, but they would face some drama. Remember Back to Basics from the first few tournaments? Well, they never really went anywhere, but we kind of stopped talking about them due to their success falling off. Well, they played quite the role in this tournament. And the runners-up from last tournament, Magicians, they had something to prove as well. But let's begin with Sparta. There was a culture that was formed on GunZ at this time, and that was gifting culture. Everyone knew Sparta was the best clan, and for whatever reason, players viewed it as a worthy trade to gift the ijji Item Shop items that cost real-life money to the core members of Sparta in order to join their clan. Literally, Sparta made their clan pay to join, which you can say what you want about the morality of that, but I honestly don't see it as much different as how internet culture has shifted toward things like gifting Twitch streamers your own personal money just because you like them or whatever. Speaking of which, feel free to join the channel down below for just $1 a month or so to help you boy out. Some players looked up to Sparta so much they basically sponsored them. While I wouldn't usually mention this as being important, this tournament it definitely was. See, while you accept money to add random players to your clan, you start running the risk of that clan's reputation being hurt. For one, like if you see some awful player in the clan Sparta, you might think, damn, Sparta fell off, why would they allow this noob into their clan? But that was small peanuts compared to what ultimately happened to them this tournament. One of the gifters this month would go on to hack inside of a clan war for Sparta, thus disqualifying the clan from the tournament with less than a week to go in qualifying. While this was absolutely heartbreaking for the lineup who had been dominating GunZ for over a year at this point, they wouldn't be so easily deterred. With less than a week to go in qualifying, they made an entirely new clan and began the qualifying process over again. Keep in mind the format is still the same from all previous tournaments, about a 2-week qualifying period where the top 32 ranked clans would be able to participate, so obviously starting over with less than half of the time left to qualify would be no easy feat. Sparta, now under a new name due to this disqualification, would field their exact same lineup from the last tournament that won, that once again being Yang, Shot, Omega, and Venom, now under the clan name Toberi. Magicians would rework the lineup after their defeat to Sparta, keeping both Flamekiller and Sorrow, and now adding new players hitting their prime in Tetsuo and Natsumi. Sorrow, also known as Kimizaru, was the leader of a clan called Aeria, and after making it to the finals the previous tournament, Sorrow and Flamekiller decided to essentially get the best 4 players of these 2 elite clans to create a European all-star team, which is how Tetsuo and Natsumi were added to the Magicians lineup this time around. But what about Back to Basics? What role did they play? Well, they would also be under a new name this tournament. For reasons I'm unsure, but they would play under the name Tripwire, with 2 original Back to Basics players and 2 new North American players. Sparta would once again face off against Back to Basics in a tournament matchup. 2 teams with a ton of GunZ history, but this time under the new monikers Toberi and Tripwire. This match would take place rather early in the tournament. It's just the way the bracket worked out, with Toberi being one of the last qualifying clans with the late push they had to do to qualify in the first place. This match is uploaded to GunZ Memories, and it took place in Mansion, and is one of the most famous matches in GunZ history. The stakes here are huge. Sparta has won 4 out of the 5 last tournaments, and Back to Basics is the only clan that had ever taken them down in a tournament match previously. And this wouldn't be GunZ without some drama. For me, this match marked the true downfall of the GunZ competitive scene, and it's related to the underclocking stuff we talked about earlier. Now, I can keep myself completely out of the opinion space here, and just let you know that since this match took place over 15 years ago, there are still many players that believe that Tripwire had at least one player who was underclocking, and possibly more than one. In fact, even the first YouTube comment on this video is speaking about how some of the Tripwire players seem to have a float about them, and then someone instantly comes in and defends Tripwire. So like, it's he said she said, but this is seen as one of those matches that was constantly talked about when it came to underclocking competitive play. Now, I know what you're thinking. Didn't the ijji GM say that this exploit wouldn't be allowed and that they'd be removing players who abused it? Well, it's just not that easy. As I said during the underclock explanation section previously, even to my trained eye as someone who has tens of thousands of hours in this game, it's just really hard to tell when someone is using this exploit. And there's no way for these GMs to prove that a player was using the exploit either, Therefore, no action was ever taken. The forum post was just a threat, as they would never find any proof of any player abusing this cheat, and as far as I know, no player was ever banned in EG for using under or overclocking exploits. Ultimately, whether you believe Tripwire could just come out of nowhere and absolutely smash Sparta into the dirt after winning 4 of the 5 last tournaments, legitimately or not, I think this game will always have an asterisk to some people. Tripwire would do just that, and as you can see, they handled their victory in grace. Okay, they didn't. They were absolute assholes about it, and frankly, I always remember Back to Basics being extraordinarily toxic, but yeah. If you do consider Tripwire the same as Back to Basics since they shared some mutual clan members, they would become the first clan to defeat Sparta in a tournament twice now. So with that drama out of the way, what were Magicians up to this tournament? Surely, with Sparta eliminated so early in the tournament, they had to be the favorites to take it all. Well, you'd be right, they sure were. Magicians would face off against Tripwire, who used a somewhat shady tactic. As you remember, the twin name meta is long gone and has been banned from tournaments at this point, but for whatever reason, Tripwire kinda found and used a loophole. Between the Tovari and Magicians match, they all changed their usernames to be somewhat similar, but not exactly twin names. I guess the admins were cool with it, but yeah, while this replay is lost to time, ultimately, in true Back to Basics fashion, they were able to beat Sparta, but ultimately unable to get their hands on a tournament win and would be eliminated by Magicians. The finals would come down to Magicians and a clan that we haven't mentioned at all to this point, Lucid. Lucid was led by a player named Hectic. While he ran in popular circles with good players, this would be the only time he'd get this close to a championship. The community would even wonder why he didn't let a stronger player in this clan named Trix take his spot to have a better chance at winning this tournament. Lucid's lineup would have some familiar names in it. Amazon from Heroics was on this team, as well as Glide and Hectic, and Venom also played for Lucid? Now, I know what you're thinking. How the hell is that possible? Didn't Venom play for Tovari against Tripwire? Well, yes, and while you're not allowed to play on more than one account, and that was against tournament rules, unfortunately, while I haven't mentioned it to this point, this was another dark and ugly part of GunZ culture. While doing all of my research of previous tournaments, I found multiple instances of players sharing their login information to play on each other's accounts for tournaments. And for simplicity's sake and narrative's sake, I've just left it out, but this is a finals match, and I feel it should be mentioned. Venom most certainly played on the character Aleli against Magicians. So while Magicians didn't have to face Sparta directly, they would have to face off against Tripwire, who may or may have not been underclocking and using twin name loopholes, who had just beaten Sparta's lineup handily earlier this tournament. Then, in the finals, they would have to go on to face Lucid, which was a mostly S-tier lineup as it was, and they account shared with the multiple-time champion Venom, making this matchup even harder than it should have been for them. This wouldn't stop Magicians, and they would handily beat Lucid on both Mansion and Garden, only dropping 2 rounds in 2 games. Thankfully, GunZ Memories has a recording of the first match at Mansion, and I was able to get in touch with 2009 Summer Tournament champion Tetsuo, who had happened to be holding on to some screenshots from that era to provide a little more context from the championship finals at Garden. Thanks to Tetsuo for the screenshots, and congratulations to Magicians becoming the first ever all-European EG GunZ tournament winners. Okay, let's finally get on to some non-GunZ tournament history. I feel like it's been a minute. On July 28th, 2009, the Survival Quest mode was officially released to EG GunZ. I barely played the original versions of Quest, but I was definitely out of the questing content at this point, so if I get something wrong regarding the mechanics, I do apologize. Survival was basically a floor crawler, almost like dungeon floors in a game like Diablo, but in a very GunZ janky way. You'd choose a map, being mansion, dungeon, or prison, but you would spawn on a random quest map within the map you chose, if that makes sense, with random enemies, and every so often you'd have to fight a random boss on a random map. This is why I say it's kind of like Diablo floors. The more floors you did, the harder and harder it would get, eventually capping at 100 floors. I can't tell you if this affected the EXP grinding meta or what it was primarily played for, but I know that that's pretty much the gist of the mechanics of it anyhow. Alright, that's all that really needs to be said about that, so moving on. Well, kinda. While we're discussing quests, let's talk about the individual rankings one last time. We previously looked back in the middle of 2008, where Convict 99 and Known Quester was the highest rank in the game. Well, that wouldn't last too much longer. As I mentioned, there's a giant gap in archive.org working from early 2009 to sometime in 2010, so I don't have the exact date. However, at some point during this gap, the first level 99 in EG GunZ history was achieved. Keep in mind, GunZ experience is progressive, so the amount of experience it takes you to get from level 98 to 99 is like the same as level 1 to 90, or something insane like that. I don't have the exact formula, unfortunately. Getting level 99 is still a huge achievement and a giant dedication to the game, so at some point in late 2009 or early 2010, Mark_code, who we haven't spoken about to this point, came out of nowhere to grab the first ever level 99 in GunZ history. Congrats to him. If anyone has a screenshot or the date that this took place, I think that would be an awesome piece of media to recover, but as of now, I believe it to be lost. Okay, we won't talk about the individual level/EXP rankings anymore, as there will be no achievement that beats this one. For this next one, I do have a date. A minor update for all of us English speakers, but was likely huge for those in South America and Germans, I guess, too. GunZ officially got a language selector added on October 1st, 2009. Before this point, the ijji version of GunZ was localized into English, and same for iGunZ before that. For as long as there's been an ijji version of the game, there were never any South American servers outside of a Brazilian server, which, you know, is Portuguese, not Spanish. So I feel like this was huge for the South American player base who was largely clicking their way through English menus and stuff before this. In hindsight, this probably should have been done years earlier, as this game did have a pretty huge South American population. Alright, well, not much else to say about that, so back to the competitive stuff. The Autumn Tournament of 2009. Lots of stuff to shake out here after that last tournament, with Sparta finally being unthroned, Magicians winning with an all-European lineup for the first time ever, and yeah, let's start here. Sparta, for the first time in a long time, would not participate. Well, at least as Sparta. The two consistent pieces of Sparta from the beginning have been the leader, Yang, and Shot. Yang, for the first time since Sparta's inception, would not be participating within this tournament. Fed up with the drama of the last few tournaments, between the DDoSing, whether you believe it or not, the underclocking, account sharing, I get why GunZ would almost be exhausting after this point, especially when you have nothing left to really prove. We're in the era of lost media, so unfortunately I can't tell you too much about what happened in this tournament, but here's what I do know. All three previous members of Sparta that did participate in this tournament made the finals. Now you're probably thinking, who replaced Yang? No, they were actually split up. I think this actually says so much about Sparta's dominance in this period. The finals of this tournament would be Shot leading Toveri, the same clan that they had used last tournament under different circumstances, against a new clan that we haven't heard of yet, Harsh. Harsh has some familiar faces though. Both Venom and Omega from the previous Sparta lineup are on the team, joined by two late bloomers who are great in their own right, Misshots and Tricks. Shot would field the best lineup he could find without Yang, consisting of Amazon, who you may remember from Heroics and Lucid, Snooper, who was a good player at the time but hasn't been to a finals at this point, and a familiar name, Dramatic. The same Dramatic that had always played with the Korean players joined up with Shot, and I think that's pretty damn cool and felt so unlikely at this time as an outsider. Unfortunately, because of the lost media, I'm not sure what the rest of the Korean players were up to this tournament over in Raza, but Dramatic at least was teaming up with Shot in Toveri. There's not much else to say about this tournament, but I did think it was kind of funny how the one tournament that Sparta takes off ends up being Sparta players versus other Sparta players in the finals. It just shows their absolute dominance as individuals at the time as well. Toveri, led by Shot, would ultimately go on to beat their Sparta counterparts Venom and Omega 2-0, beating them at both Battle Arena and Garden. Thankfully, these matches were preserved by GunZ memories. This would be the first championship wins for both Amazon and Snooper, and just adding to the trophy case for both Shot and Dramatic. This would be the end of Omega's career. He would retire with 5 ijji GunZ tournament championships, making him one of the best players to ever play. As far as the GOAT conversation goes, now that Shot has won this tournament over Omega, this also gives him 5 championships. If you remember, Omega won one way back in January of 2008 with Basic before he joined Sparta. If you're a guy who tracks GOAT status by rings, I guess you could say at this point they'd be tied. While Omega retired, not the same could be said for the rest of the previous Sparta lineup. We'll get there. Well, technically, we're actually already there, because the next point in the timeline is the Winter Tournament of 2009, so let's just get to it. The original lineup of Yang, Shot, Omega, and Venom would never return, but Yang and Shot would be bringing Sparta back for one final hoorah. After a needed break for Yang, him and Shot would add 2 new teammates to the Sparta lineup, that being Dramatic, who you remember won a crown with Shot in the previous tournament, and Misshots, who is playing against Shot in Harsh. That's a tongue twister. This tournament was slightly better preserved. I was able to find out at least who the final 8 of this tournament were. I don't recognize some of these clans, but the final 4 was actually really interesting. While most of these names don't likely look familiar, a lot of the players will. Mahatma is basically everyone that wasn't in Sparta's lineup from the previous finals. Their lineup would be Venom, Snooper, Amazon, and Tricks. They would face off against a known pretty damn good European team named Revived, while Sparta would play against another European team as well named Levitas. 2 NA clans versus 2 EU clans. Couldn't have been written any better, honestly. Sparta would play against Levitas in the quarterfinals. You remember a few tournaments ago where Tripwire beat Sparta and Magicians ultimately won it all? Well, this lineup that Levitas had was basically the same Magicians lineup, but they added another legendary player, Energy, as well. Yes, the same Energy that was playing for Standard all the way back in 2007. The longevity of some of these players is just crazy. Sparta would ultimately get some sort of revenge by taking down this lineup. This has been saved on GunZ memories, thankfully, and I think this is the first tournament that non-finals matches had a best of 3 on multiple maps, instead of that only being the case in the finals. It would appear that Tetsuo subbed in for Sorrow or vice versa, as it was a 2-0 set and they each played 1 match. The other European clan, Revived, would also not fare so well, setting up a fully North American finals. What I found most interesting about these finals is while Omega may have retired and Yang returned, these final 8 players are the exact final 8 players from the previous tournament minus that one change. Obviously the teams are a little different too, but it just shows how great these top 10 players were for years and years. In true tournament fashion, I did stumble upon some drama in this final tournament match for Sparta. In a match that can be found on YouTube at Battle Arena, this match ultimately wouldn't end up counting because the player Snooper had apparently been having ping spikes and teleporting around. Mahatma would have won this game 6-1, but ultimately it was overturned. Depending on who you'd ask, I'm sure you'd hear a few different stories here, but yeah, that's what the admins decided. In true Sparta fashion, in their final run, the one last hoorah, they would take down Mahatma and end up winning the series. This would be the end of anyone ever playing under the Sparta banner, and Yang would disband the clan shortly after. He would also, like Omega the tournament previously, now have 5 championship wins. This of course would be Shot's 6th championship, now making him single-handedly hold the title for most tournament wins in GunZ history at this point. Sparta would go down as one of the most legendary clans in GunZ history, and if I may take a second to go away from facts to talk about my personal experience as an extremely active player, I do remember Sparta being the best clan in GunZ history. And while we're going through documenting all of this, I don't think there's any arguing that. In the 7 tournaments the clan participated in, they won 5 of them, and that's just an insane rate considering how good some of their opposition was, especially in those 2008 era tournaments. There were many stacked lineups, and at the time I didn't always feel certain that they would win. It felt nice to put it all on paper and just see how dominant they really were, rather than just my memory of nearly 20 years ago thinking that they were always the best.
While esports weren't nearly as large as they are nowadays, I think dominating a game, especially a game with such a giant skill cap for literally multiple years, is an awesome feat, and not something that you even see today in esports. There's typically quite a bit of parity. I was curious, what did it take to be the best at this game?
Sparta was always an ongoing work in progress, and I don't think any core member ever forgot their roots. Anyone who was a part of the foundation of the clan always had one goal in mind, and that was to establish a clan that could rival the greats at the time. Sparta individually took just as many losses, if not more, than most players in their entire time spent on GunZ to get to where we were during our era of dominance. While we might not be everyone's goats or favorite clan, which is totally fine, it's an undeniable truth that we always performed when it mattered. I've been asked similar questions over the years, and my response is that I would always do it all over again if I had the chance. I met a lot of dope people over the years that I still talk to this day, even outside of the Sparta roster, and I wouldn't trade those bonds for anything.
I noticed that Sparta also seemed to put much more of an emphasis on teamwork.
I studied a lot of film from top clans over the years, dating back to even international GunZ days. I sourced a lot of my tactical inspiration of swordplay and team cohesion from Korean clans. These clans in particular were Strike, Genre, and Forever. I essentially adopted their gameplay style and refined it into Sparta's own system. Although GunZ wasn't that complex of a game in a macro sense, the one thing I am most proud of implementing in Sparta, aside from our obvious Korean influences, is that I constantly drilled a partner system within the tournament roster. Simply put, if you're ever chasing or fighting a target alone as a Sparta member, you are playing the game incorrectly, and I would call anyone out in voice or team chat to fix that issue immediately. The concept sounds really basic on paper, but you'd be surprised at how difficult it was for a lot of GunZ players to adopt this mentality. GunZ is a selfish and ego-driven game at its core, but Sparta prioritized selfless gameplay above all. It's honestly why it took so long for the competitive community to catch up to us as a clan. If you watch enough GunZ memory videos, you'll often see enemy team chats talking about the strong teamwork that we had and how difficult it was to isolate a Sparta member without being punished. Throughout multiple tournament rosters and careful vetting, I think the best iteration of Sparta teamwork was with the addition of Venom to our lineup. Our gameplay was structured around myself and Shot being on the front lines creating space and drawing attention, while Omega and Venom were behind us as supports doing damage without being primarily focused. All the missing puzzle pieces were there, and I was incredibly satisfied with the state of the clan at that point in time.
Sparta, like many players around this time, would stop competing at the game as we all grew older and the flawed game continued to show its cracks. But I had to know, why did Sparta decide to ultimately step down?
So for the entire team, I'd have to attribute it to a lack of interest in the game and overall complacency that had been building over the years. The rampant cheating and publicizing of underclocking methods didn't help either. GunZ felt like it was losing its competitive integrity as the months went by. To be honest, Sparta as a clan had already reached the top of the summit multiple times. We accomplished everything there was to do as a team and held nearly every accolade you could want as a competitive player. Multiple rank 1s in the monthly clan rankings, consecutive tournament victories, and even the highest recorded win streak in GunZ clan war history. We truly did it all, and there was just frankly nothing else for us to accomplish as our legacy was already set in stone. I felt like out of any clan to have played the game, retirement was the only proper path to follow after doing all of that. As for me personally, I was just losing interest in the game because I had devoted so many years to it already, and that led to me becoming jaded over time, especially with the amount of drama that followed some of our matches when certain individuals were involved. I also wanted to try new games on the PC beyond RuneScape and GunZ. I actually remember getting hooked on World of Warcraft, Wrath of Lich King around that time. That consumed my life for a minute. With that said, I never gave up gaming as a hobby. It's way too fun, so I still enjoy it to this day. I even returned to GunZ private servers around late 2012, and I formed entirely new teams without any of the original Sparta members, and won multiple tournaments until 2015, but that's a story for another time.
Take a bow, Sparta. You guys will go down as the goats of GunZ unless it gets a seriously impressive revival in the next few decades.
Splendid! You killed them all!
At this point, the game was less popular than it was the previous 2 years. After years and years of pay to win, cheating in various ways, lots of players quit or at the very least put the game down for very long extended periods of time. I'd say player counts were pretty much always between 2,000 and 4,000 players concurrently at this point, where in its peak years it could have hit 10,000 on pretty much any given weekend. The competitive community was shrunk down quite a bit, and that makes sense. Questing wasn't really as affected by cheaters. Ultimately, they were just playing against themselves just to try and level up as fast as possible or chill out with their friends or whatever their objective was. There were auto-quest programs at certain points, and you could use regular hacks that would be used against players in Quest as well. It'd still help you, but yeah, I think just naturally the competitive community was more hurt by cheating. As the game gets more and more infested with cheating and less developer support, it only makes sense that we would go from like 10 to 20 really good competitive S-tier clans in 2007 to like 3 or something by the end of 2009. With less and less clans and a giant skill cap, our competitive population really did dwindle more and more. I just wanted to add a bit more context to the state of GunZ at the time because to me, in my opinion, from this point forward, GunZ was on a downward turn which had already begun by winter 2009. Anyways, now I'll get back to facts and stuff and do my best to keep documenting this timeline thing that we've been doing. The next thing on the timeline is a bit of a bummer, but I thought it would be significant enough to mention the release of the Fenrir Guardian set and the Citadel map. I'm placing this at January 30th, 2010 because I can't find the exact release date, but thankfully Tetsuo had an old hard drive and this was the earliest screenshot he could find on the map, and through all my research I just couldn't find anything earlier. The Citadel map would now be the second map added to the game by a contest winner, but boy, it was not implemented as well as the first one. For our shitty PCs back then, a lot of us frame lagged near the water on certain maps. Like, I basically couldn't play on port to save my life because half the map had water in it, and this entire map was just covered in water. On top of that, it was super wide open like Battle Arena, and the only non-wide open part had a tiny roof where you couldn't correctly play the game. It was just not overall implemented great. This map would be added to the clan war rotation, but it didn't stay in it for long because we all hated it and complained to the GMs so much. The most important part of this update was probably the Fenrir release, because at this point Fenrir becomes the best in slot pay to win crap, and everyone who's playing this game competitively from this point on is paying for it. Okay, this next update is pretty cool, and one of the few game updates that competitive players got in its GunZ lifetime. I wish it had come out earlier, honestly. March 30th, 2010, the Duel Tournament mode was released. This mode would use matchmaking to match 8 players up in a 1v1 tournament bracket on various Duel Mode specific maps in the game. This mode had a ranking system built into the client similar to how Clan War mode worked, and users would now also have an icon added to their username signifying their rank in game. While this mode was pretty cool for a few weeks, I do remember it falling off in popularity after a while. Competitive players mostly just stuck to Clan Wars or public lobbies, but it still was a really cool addition to the game. Next up on the timeline is another tournament, this time the Spring 2010 tournament. This tournament is going to be the first tournament without Sparta, and to this point I'd say the weakest tournament to date. Thankfully, I was able to find a screenshot of the 2010 bracket. However, not much replay footage seems to exist of this tournament. What I do know is that I barely recognize any of the clan names in this bracket. You may be asking yourself, why are there multiple clans named Headshoot? Well, I'll get to that point a little bit later on when they play a bigger role in GunZ. Raza, however, is a noticeable name on the bracket. You may remember these are the same core of Korean players who played as far back as the first tournament where they win under the clan name Strike. The second most recognizable name would have to be Magicians here, and thankfully this matchup is saved on YouTube. I don't actually recognize any of these names in the Magicians lineup except for Samaji is Tweety. I'm sure Flamekiller is one of these players, but I'm really just unsure who all of these alternate characters are. And everyone I asked seems to be turning up blanks as well. Why was everyone so obsessed with playing on alternate characters that weren't their mains back then, man? It's making this needlessly hard. Raza came into the tournament with an honestly stacked lineup. The first thing that probably sticks out when I show you this lineup from Raza is that Shot is playing, but I've nearly 100% confirmed that Shot was actually just subbing in for another player who was unable to make it during the earlier rounds of this tournament. The other 3 Raza members in this match are Rain, Genre, and Dramatic, all of which of course have had great tournament success in the past. You'll remember Dramatic just finished playing with Sparta during the final iteration of that team, so it makes sense that they'd have Shot as a substitute on the back burner. Must be nice to be able to pull the GOAT off the bench, dude. The player I was told Shot likely sub for was a player named Nicene. Ultimately, Raza would go on to defeat Magicians in this tournament and, well, everyone else. While the finals matchup of this tournament seems to be lost media, I was able to confirm that Raza would go on to win this tournament on the clan No Limits forums, where someone was asking the same question that I was in my research. It's cool to still find some old GunZ forums up on the internet with enough digging. I didn't even have to use archive.org for this. Get used to this lack of media proof going forward. As the game died, less and less proof existed of it naturally. Considering the Korean success in early ijji and now in the post-Sparta era, I think it's definitely safe to say at this point that the Korean members of Strike, Forever, Genre, Raza, or whatever clan they're in now are likely the second best group of players to ever play this game. It did take me making this video to realize that, although my memory served me great for Sparta, unfortunately our memories don't always remember second best, but that had to be these guys. This would be multiple tournament wins for Genre and Rain, with likely 3 or 4 tournaments each now, but as mentioned in the previous tournaments, these guys had success in the twin name era and used alts, so it was hard to keep track of. Dramatic of course has 2 extra wins in Sparta and Toberi, making him the most accomplished of all the players in the Korean clans. For a lot of Sparta stuff, as you saw, I was able to get first-hand sources like with Yong, but unfortunately I just have no connections to these players. I asked around, but nobody else seemed to either. Ultimately though, what matters for documentation is who factually won the tournament of spring 2010, and it was Raza. Congrats to them. The next update is really small, but because we're running out of updates of significance, and especially ones with proof of release dates, I thought it would be worth documenting that Relay Map was officially released on May 17th, 2010. Relay Map was basically a quality of life update, but it was pretty nice. Typically, there'd be 10-round TDMs going in the public channels if you weren't looking to sweat in a clan war. Manually, after each game, the host would usually ask the lobby which map everyone wanted to play next, we'd pick one and move on. With Relay Map, you could just select as many maps as you want, put them on repeat, and keep the lobby moving rather than having to manually restart it every 10 rounds. It would just automatically switch up the map for you. It was pretty cool, that's it. The next update though, is pretty freaking huge. GunZ 1.5 would release July 21st, 2010. Now look, I searched long and hard for some solid proof of a release date on this, as I think it's the most significant update that GunZ got as far as most shit packed into a single update in quite some time. GunZ 2 had already been announced at this point in history, so because this patch was so big, I guess the devs decided it would be worth the GunZ 1.5 name. While this isn't great proof, you can hover over this thread from the old ijji forums, and yes, the link is broken, so I can't confirm it does go on to talk about GunZ 1.5, but I did have the release date marked as somewhere in this area when I was timelining it anyway, and I'm just almost sure this is it based on the wording you can see when you hover. So put an asterisk if you want to on the date, but yeah, this is where we're talking about GunZ 1.5. Quite a few things changed in this update. For one, a few technical things changed under the hood, but frankly, I don't quite understand it too much, so I'm going to stay hands off with that and I'm going to speak like a player, which I was, and am. This update would be the first change to the GunZ interface dating all the way back to 2005. Things were moved to different spots, as well as new stuff being added to the UI because, you know, update stuff. This would add the avatar slot to characters. Remember when I said everyone would wear the Fenrir Guardian set just because the stats were too good not to? Well, this gave everyone the ability to cover that ugly hunk of metal up with something else. Avatars would be purely cosmetic skins that would override the visual style of your armor but not change their stats. Fenrir was freaking ugly, so this was basically a way that they could charge us for both pay-to-win armor as well as cosmetics to look cool. Their greed knew no end. Along with the added avatar slot, this also introduced a few new items into the game, most importantly, pills and vials. If you play GunZ on a private server today in 2025, you will likely see people healing with pills and vials and not regular old meds. While Prem meds were probably still best in slot because they healed up a little more, vials were unique because they would heal you over time. So you drop one that healed like 30 something instead of 20 from a Prem med, but it wouldn't be instant, it would tick over the next 5 or so seconds. Thankfully vials were free, so a lot of players would opt to use these as a free alternative to Prem meds. While you may remember healing health and armor with vials, you may not remember acceleration vials. These things were an absolute plague to the game when they were released. They weren't considered best in slot or anything, but my god were they annoying. The acceleration vials basically made it so when you walked in the game normally you had like a speed hack around and you can move around the map so stupidly fast, but like I said, it was more just a nuisance. While this footage I found wasn't on ijji, it looks like this private server had it exactly how it was on ijji, basically speed hacks at the cost of losing the healing slot. Thankfully these things didn't work while you were doing K-style movements or we'd have been so fucked. While I do think a few more things did change with the GunZ 1.5 updates, I can't find the patch notes, and I don't exactly remember what else might have been added, but yeah, that pretty much covers the release. This mostly felt so gigantic because of the avatar slot and the changed up UI, as we have been used to the same one for like 5 years at this point. In summer of 2010, it appears that ijji hosted 3 separate tournaments. The game population had clearly been declining, but the GMs decided to go hard in the paint, I guess. I can't ever remember 3 events going on simultaneously like this. The 3 tournaments would be a World Cup tournament, a 1v1 tournament, and the usual Clan War tournament. I vaguely remember the World Cup tournament being a sign-up system where you could represent your country in a 4v4, but this all seems to be lost to time. I'm really not too sure. I also have no idea of the results, and the same can be said for this 1v1 tournament, unfortunately. All the links here are pretty much broken. While basically nothing of the Clan War tournament exists either, I was able to scrape the old reliable archive.org for some GunZFactor posts at the time, and managed to stumble upon this post, naming the clan Port News as the winners with the lineup posted. It was also mentioned that Port News was playing against Raza. With this giant clue, I was then able to go on YouTube, and lo and behold, GunZ Memories once again comes in the clutch with the actual finals match itself. Raza's lineup would feature a lot of familiar faces that you'd often see playing with the Koreans. Everyone in Raza on screen is on an alternate character, but I'll pop up names to correlate which player goes to which on the screen. I didn't go through the effort of figuring this all out to keep it to myself after all. The lineup was dramatic, genre, rain, and the big shocker here is Yong. Yong was playing on an alt, however I've definitely confirmed that this was him. He would be replacing Nisine, who couldn't make it last minute, so they hadn't originally planned to have Yong play. Those years-long friendships really helped out. It goes back multiple years to when Rain was playing in Sparta, and more recently when Dramatic was playing with them as well. Raza has Sparta on speed dial in these tournaments, man. If I had to replace someone on my team, I'd probably have to hand over the keyboard to one of my cats. Anyways, I didn't explicitly mention Yong's retirement previously, as this would be his actual final tournament match, although it wasn't originally planned to be. The Port News clan, which was led by former champion Snoofer, had another former champion, Amazon, in the lineup, as well as 2 new faces, Glide and Divine Rose. Glide was a member of the Heroics clan, which we talked a lot about previously, but while he wasn't a tournament player there, you may remember he did play with Amazon and Lucid a few tournaments earlier. I personally was 1 foot out the door with GunZ at this point, but I had previously known Divine Rose as some player going around calling themselves Jess. Turns out it was a dude. In a game like this, with my 99% male audience, shocker. Anyways, with a few more players calling it quits, this was another stacked finals. All of these players were great for their time. Even though more of the older players of the game had quit at this point, I think it's pretty fair to say the skill ceiling was only rising, considering it's still rising to this day. Ultimately, Port News would get the win over Raza, stopping the back-to-back dreams that the Korean squad had been hoping for, giving Glide and Divine Rose their first crowns. Something significant about this tournament was that while this was the summer tournament, for the first time ever since the start of Clan War tournaments back in late 2007, there would be no autumn tournament. While the game's population dwindled, so did our Clan War tournaments, so this would be the last of the seasonal tournaments, although not the very last tournament. I myself did play in a few of these tournaments, but all of the replays are lost to time. It's a shame because I've had some crazy stuff happen where someone on the other team shared the password, strangers were joining the lobby. It was crazy. If anyone has the Thief vs Athena tournament match replay on an old hard drive somewhere, I'll give you a piece of my soul for it. My bathwater, whatever you want, seriously. It was out there at one point because it was on GunZFactor and later on GunZReplays.net, but I can't find it anymore. Autumn of 2010, we were all expecting a tournament. Hell, I remember even buying all of my pay-to-win crap right near the first of the month, only to find out that there wouldn't be a tournament. I was so upset. Like I said, I had 1 foot out the door as it was. I'm mentioning this because I think a lot of players felt similarly at the time, where GunZ was only fun for us during those tournament months at this point. This is in 2010, so like League of Legends is brand new and taking over the esports world. Hell, remember Trix from the previous few tournaments? He'd actually go on to become a professional League of Legends player, even getting a start for the legendary team in the scene, CLG. He would be let go shortly after his one and only game ended for CLG, so we'll speak nothing else of that. Between all the underclocking and other types of cheating, less players, less updates, etc., it was really disappointing to not even have my quarterly GunZ fix. While the game was already heading downhill, the tournaments no longer being quarterly would just be another metric to see that downward trend. Alright, let's move on. I can't get the exact dates for the next 2 things, but I believe the Weapon Shop map was released in late November 2010, if not December 2010. This map was pretty cool, and honestly, I think it was probably the best of all of the fan-made maps, which I believe this one was as well. These lazy bastards just outsourced map design to us, and I'm just now realizing that in hindsight. Can you guys just make like one original map from 2005 onward, please? This map would have advertisements for their other game, Raiders, on the lamps of the ceiling, which I always thought was cool. There's some odd posters on the wall, and even a little Grand Theft Auto 4 Easter egg. Pretty sick, honestly. This map is still occasionally played today, and was added to the Clan War rotation at the time. I also believe that when this map was added, Citadel was removed, making it the only map to ever be removed from Clan War rotation because it was just that bad. This would be the last time we get a new map, or a new Clan War map rotation. The next thing I want to discuss, which also doesn't have a date, but I will place as generically late 2010, this would be an update quite literally larger than anything MAIET had ever released prior. And of course, MAIET didn't release it. This would be the inception of an anti-lead GunZ server. Now, I'm intentionally staying away from pretty much all private server discussion as I'm trying to meticulously document the history of the official versions of the game, but I think a few things are just too worth mentioning. This would definitely be one of those things. Hero Gamers was a private server that's base language was actually in Spanish, but let me tell you, almost all of us GunZ nerds at the time got our Espanol on for a second to see what was actually up. I've mentioned it a few times, likely hours ago at this point near the start of the video, but basically the terrible netcode in this game created something called lead shot, which was a weird interaction between ping and predicting where your enemies would move. Hero Gamers became the first private server to have a GunZ server where you could just actually shoot directly at enemies, a wild concept for the game. The earliest mention I could find of anti-lead would be April 2010. You can see a post here from the Hero Gamers forums, and while it's not directly mentioned, they do say they plan on releasing a new client which will solve certain problems that GunZ had, and I can only imagine that that's what they were talking about. It definitely would release in late 2010, as I was able to find users asking for the code to add to their P servers on another forum by the end of that year. While I don't know any of the technical aspects of how this is possible, I know it was huge for the community, as for the first time ever, us competitive guys were trying out a private server to see what the hype was all about. I remember the community being pretty split on this. Some people loved it and some people hated it, because ultimately it did change a lot about the game. Time has proven to us that this would be a monumental update, as all private servers now use anti-lead, and even the new official server slated to come out hopefully later in this year in 2025 will likely have anti-lead as well. Okay, that's enough of P servers. Let's see what was going on at ijji during the rest of 2010. Well, literally nothing. No autumn tournament as previously mentioned, and no significant game updates to talk about, so we're jumping to the very end of 2010 and early 2011 to discuss the winter 2010 tournament. While I know factually that a winter 2010 tournament did happen and take place, unfortunately this is the largest roadblock of lost media I've found to this point. I believe there's a match or two from this tournament on GunZ Memories, but I have absolutely zero proof of any finals matches that took place, the lineups, or anything. While every single thing in this video to this point has been factual outside of my opinions I throw in here and there, this will be the first tournament that I just had to talk around the community and try to figure out who won, and while I'm pretty confident I did figure it out, we'll just have to put an asterisk on it. I can't tell you who qualified, who the clans were, I mean literally nothing. What I had heard consistently throughout all of my hours and hours of research at this point was that a player named Bergs won a tournament late in ijji and had a crown. I remembered Bergs. He was a great player, had some awesome frag videos back in the day, and I didn't know that he had ascended to such heights in the game. You may have seen his clan name even in some of the brackets to this point, but I remember him being the leader of a clan named Vision. When it was all said and done, I had accounted for every single Clan War tournament that happened and all of their winners except for one, winter of 2010. Given that no one had a reason to lie to me about Bergs winning a championship, he seemed like the missing piece in my puzzle of tournament winners, so I reached out to him. While Bergs does know that he won a championship and definitely had a crown on ijji, he couldn't tell me what date it happened, what clan he was playing in, or who he even went against in the finals, but thankfully he at least remembered his teammates. His lineup would be himself, Kishin, Moritz, and Illusion. While Bergs was known for leading the clan Vision, he's also unsure if that's the clan that they played under. I'm not super familiar with any of these guys besides Bergs, but regardless, winning a tournament is awesome, so congrats to all of them. Assuming all of this is accurate, this would make them the second ever clan to win with an all-European lineup. There's not much else to say here without any associated media to run off of, so let's just move on. The next thing on the list is once again private server related, and will be the last P server related topic on the timeline. The Watch the Throne private server was released on January 13th, 2011. Yes, it is in fact a Jay-Z Kanye West reference. This private server was significant because it was actually co-owned by now retired Sparta players Yong and Shot, and was the first ever GunZ P server to put an emphasis on competitive play. While a few private servers had already existed for years at this point and were gaining in popularity at this time due to anti-lead being put into the game, Watch the Throne was unique because it was the first non-pay-to-win GunZ server. Most private servers out there followed a donation for pay-to-win model at the time, because the actual game was pay-to-win, so I imagine they figured why not also cash in. The point of Watch the Throne was to remove that and just create an environment where players could play competitively on an anti-league gun server where you didn't have to drop 20 bucks or whatever it was at this point on ijji for best in slot gear every month. Unfortunately, the vision didn't exactly pan out and the server wouldn't last very long. But it did take the community by storm for a little bit there, being that Shot and Yang briefly unretired and it was 100% free. Moving back to the official version of GunZ hosted on ijji, they wouldn't do another tournament until the summer of 2011, so they skipped spring, but now they're back. While there's basically no footage of this tournament left, just like the previous one, I actually stumbled upon a couple minutes of the final round of this entire tournament on YouTube, and it was uploaded by none other than Bloodthirst 2. I said his name way earlier in this video, but Bloodthirst, or Roy as the community called him's influence on this game was actually massive. In a previous tournament, I pointed out that there were multiple clans going by the name of Headshoot with different brackets around their name. This is because Roy was GunZ's first and only esports organization owner. That might sound insane because, like, why even was there an esports organization? But let's remember, this is 2011. While the game itself was pretty much dead at this point compared to its past, esports in general are taking off huge. Teams like CLG and TSM are getting hundreds of thousands of live viewers every week, and they have a freaking reality show about them. Like, life was good for esports at this time. A lot of investment was going in. Rory was investing in GunZ esports, and maybe he had a larger plan in place. Maybe he thought he could take this experience into the esports field in general. I'm really not sure, but that's definitely what was going on. Rory would field multiple different Headshoot clans, assign them a leader and members, and would have the clans all run individually but under his banner. And you're probably asking, why the hell would good players agree to do that? Was Roy good at the game? Well, here's Roy playing. It's a bit unconventional, especially for this time. Earlier, I wondered why Roy and the high scores had more kills than everyone on the top 20, yet he was only ranked 17. And while he clearly played some deathmatch, his YouTube channel I stumbled upon does show him questing a bit as well. So yeah, I guess he did both. What he didn't do though was clan war. This was purely some sort of investment for him. Whether he just really badly wanted to be somewhat responsible for a clan war tournament victory, or he just really wanted this experience of an esports team owner, I'm really unsure. The reason people would play under the Headshoot banner for Roy was stinking rich. He would provide all the pay-to-win items for his players, essentially removing the need to buy them yourself on tournament months. You may remember I previously mentioned players gifting to join clans like Sparta as a way of sponsorship, so this was basically that but on a whole new level. And it goes beyond just buying all the players the best in slot gear to clan war. He would buy them gaming keyboards, gaming mice. Hell, my best friend to this day actually was a leader for one of these Headshoot clans during this era, and Roy actually purchased one of his clanmates an entire gaming PC because his original one broke. I guess his strategy would be to get as many of these Headshoot clans to qualify in the top 32 in order to have the greatest possible chances at winning. But as you've seen in the past, it's not exactly that easy. Although there were always 32 teams, there was practically no parity at the very top. Really, if you look at a lot of the later GunZ competitive history, you can pretty much always guarantee who would be in the final 4 clans. Anyways, back to Headshoot. How insane, dude. Roy, if you're out there, I'd love to talk to you and just learn about what was going on back there. I hate to be that guy, but Roy was known for being old back then, like a 52-year-old or something I have in my head, which would place him at almost 70 now. Bro, if you're out there, let me know. Let's spill the tea. Anyways, the reason all of this is relevant is the final match of this 2011 summer tournament would be Headshoot vs Revived, and the only footage I was able to find was on Roy's old YouTube page that's somehow still up, showing off the final round of him finally achieving a Headshoot tournament win after over a year of trying at this point. Congrats, Roy, and of course to the players who actually played in Headshoot. While we have very little information about this entire tournament, I do want to shout out the champions, as I was able to track one down and confirm everyone from this team's username that they usually went by. The lineup was Valiate, Unknown DJ, Gultars, and Kaio Masamune. The first thing that stuck out to me about this match is, why the hell are they playing on the map Station? As far as I knew, this map was never in the Clan War rotation, and was never played competitively, so why the hell did the tournament finals end up here? To be fair, I had completely quit GunZ at this point, so maybe it did get added, but everyone I asked from that era didn't recall either. The team Headshoot would ultimately beat would be Revived, and want to know something crazy? While I was writing this final segment, I thought to myself, damn, Revived has been in like every single tournament, so I went back and checked, and yeah, every single one of them, man, going all the way back to the very first tournament. They were always a tier below the very best in my memory, but wow, insane consistency. That's really cool to see. Shout out to their leader Beyond Death, who led that clan for what, probably 5 years at this point? That's pretty cool. This would be the last ever Clan War tournament to be hosted on ijji Games. While there would be other official tournaments down the line, none of them would be Clan War tournaments in this format with the qualifying stages, bracket pick'em events, iPods, the whole deal. This was it. So truly the end of the competitive era is right here in summer of 2011. Headshoot would win the final official GunZ Clan War tournament. The next date on our timeline is going to be August 27th, 2011. This was the first point on the timeline where I had no idea that this update was ever even added to the game. I learned about it while researching this. Challenge Quest would be released as a new game mode. Thankfully, I found this YouTube channel called Burnt Jello who seemed to be really into questing in GunZ at the time, and he was uploading these quests on the day they were released, so he basically preserved the moment for us, which is awesome, even if he didn't mean to. Thanks, Burnt Jello. From what I can see, Challenge Quest, while it's its own game mode, at its core is the same as a regular quest mode. You spawn in with a team, you take down NPCs the game spawns at you in waves until you advance to the next stage. The final stage of these quests have bosses, all of which I'm unfamiliar with and seems very hard to find any official information on. For the previous bosses, I found a database of all their drops, and I had a great memory for that stuff too, but that's just not the case with Challenge Quest, unfortunately. It's clear MAIET was finally attempting to give this game more lore, and that makes sense as GunZ 2 would be releasing right around the corner. Some of these quests had titles like Suppress the Rebellion and Rebel Secret Base, whereas the quests previously were just named after the boss or page that you were doing. While I am placing this on August 27th, it appears these quests were not all released at once. Rather, this is when the first one released. The first of these quests was level 1, and they went all the way up to level 71 according to what Burnt Jello documented for us. Check out who he managed to take down this level 71 boss. Real pro right here. Glad MAIET was committed to continuing to make a terrible buggy mess of a game all the way until the end. This level 71 quest came out around March 15th, so it looks like it took a little bit less than a year for them to release them all. I think that pretty much sums up everything I can figure out about Challenge Quest. So, there's a pretty big gap here on the timeline, and that's because ijji was, well, underwater. I didn't know it at the time, not sure if I just wasn't paying attention to the community enough or if I was just too young to care or what, but the writing was clearly on the walls. The events and tournaments had slowed down, which this is what ijji was directly responsible for, and they basically had disappeared. I'm not sure how successful ijji's other games were, but if they were on the same trajectory as GunZ, I'm sure they weren't making nearly as much money as they previously had. Those challenge quests over that year span seemed to be the only significant updates that GunZ got. The next spot on the timeline would be a bit after that, on June 13th, 2012. GunZ servers would be officially migrated from ijji to Aeria Games. In January of 2012, Aeria Games had purchased ijji, so this was a planned migration where you could use a link over on the Aeria Games website to make sure your account and everything got transferred over. I do remember transferring over my account and stuff, but I definitely was not playing the game much or at all during this time. I wouldn't be shocked if I played Aeria GunZ less than 5 times total. Aeria Games was basically just a more popular version of ijji at the time, an online game hosting website that would eventually become obsolete as well because, well, Steam exists. Anyways, to shoot it straight with you, GunZ wasn't supported very well during the Aeria days, and a lot of it has to do on the developers. If you want to know more specific stuff about MAIET during that time, you can watch my GunZ 2 video. It covers this time for them basically failing as developers. Aeria inherited GunZ in a package deal with a bunch of other ijji games that it was hosting, so I don't blame them for not supporting the game well if the developers also didn't care themselves. To give Aeria some credit, they did go on to host the game for a little bit, so let's talk about what did happen of significance during the Aeria days. First and foremost, a little more than a month after the transfer, Blitz Mode would be released to GunZ the Duel. This is yet another update that I had actually no idea ever even happened to the game. I learned about it during my research. Blitz Mode was basically MAIET's attempt at creating a MOBA inside of GunZ. At this point in time, League of Legends had become the largest game in the world, and it's not even close. Other MOBAs were gaining traction like Dota, Smite, so yeah, I guess I see why MAIET would try and do this, but like, do you really think your MOBA game is going to be better than a fully fleshed out actual MOBA like League? I think it's a pretty large waste of development resources, personally. Thankfully, I was able to track down some old YouTube videos and this really comprehensive guide on the old Aeria Games forums. A high-level overview of this game type is that you queue up in the lobby and the game matches you into a 4v4 against another team. There are NPCs that spawn for both teams, think like minions from League of Legends, except they're like GunZ quest monsters. And you can choose to give these minions certain power-ups to assist you via an in-game mode shop. Your objective is to fight the other team's enemies to eventually break down their base and destroy the other team's radar, which is basically the Nexus from League of Legends, so if you destroy it, you win. Another thing that was added to this game mode would be the medal shop. By playing this game mode, you would earn a currency called medals. You could use these medals to purchase various in-game items, like the previously mentioned avatars. They added a ton of these cosmetic avatars stars into the game over these final years. I heard earning these medals were extremely time consuming for the stuff everyone really wanted, and from what I can see, you couldn't actually just buy these medals from the Aeria shop, so I'm honestly surprised they didn't have a way you could just straight up fast track it. If I'm mistaken, let me know. They did add a few new gamble mechanics to the Aeria Games Item Shop, by the way, something called Loot Forge and Loot Wheel. Not sure how any of these worked, but yeah, basically just more predatory nonsense that I'm not going to bother going into. Out of everyone I've consulted making this video, only one person I know actually even ever knew that this game mode was added to the game, so it goes to show you just how unalive the game was by this point. This was pretty cool to stumble upon the archive guide that really broke everything down, so it must have at least had a small dedicated community. I'm glad I found all of this. Moving on, let's talk about the tournaments that Aeria Games would host. Aeria would seemingly want to support this game's competitive nature after inheriting it, but it's apparent they weren't quite sure on how to handle it. Aeria would attempt to bring back the original style Clan War tournaments that we all loved, but they missed the memo on how to do it. They wanted it to be general signups instead of the qualifying period, which felt so crucial to the format of the previous tournaments. When the community was outraged by the signups and rule set, they decided to postpone the clan tournament, and ultimately it never happened. A few tournaments did happen though. Let's start here. March 15th, 2013, Dolphin Rider would win the first and only Gladiator tournament. Through my research, I've seen mention of quite a few Gladiator tournaments back in the ijji days, but unfortunately it seems these tournaments weren't considered official by the Gladiator community, as they had rule sets that differed from how Gladiators were accustomed to playing. ijji had tried to do a Team Gladiator thing, but the Gladiator sub-community always had done things 1v1 and in a very specific way. For example, in Gladiator, you're not allowed to use flips, or those cash shop items that change the element of your sword to fire or poison or whatever. Most Gladiators agree to only use a rusty sword to prolong the matches. In the ijji tournaments they tried, they didn't seem to put these rules in place, thus removing some of the skill from Gladiator. I never got into the Gladiator aspect of the game, but this was honestly a giant popular sub-community on GunZ that I basically haven't even scratched the surface on. This community goes all the way back to the roots of GunZ back in iGunZ in 2005. You'd always see lobbies at battle arenas with people bowing before fighting like some shit out of a movie and honorably fighting each other with their very specific rule set. GunZ is like a movie now that I mention it, dude. Why the fuck is this video so long? Anyhow, this tournament held by Aeria in 2013 would be the only tournament the Gladiator community would consider official, and thankfully there's some footage of it saved on YouTube. Now, I briefly mentioned angles and stuff way earlier in the video, but you can see how Dolphin Rider manages to do this like 360 no-scope thing when he's slashing, and that clearly is giving him some sort of advantage to break through the other guy's defense. I don't know, man, I feel like I'm watching checkers and everyone else is playing chess. From what I understand, Dolphin was an extremely good Gladiator and was 100% deserving of this championship, so congratulations to him. He would go down as one of the final champions in GunZ history, but not the final. The next point on the timeline is April 28th, 2013, which would be the final tournament in GunZ history, a 1v1 tournament. Like the Gladiator tournament, this was just open signups. There was no qualifying or anything. On April 28th, 2013, Angry would be crowned the final GunZ the Duel champion and would win the GunZ 1v1 tournament. This tournament featured 64 players who all signed up to compete in a classic town 1v1. One of the most significant things I noticed about this tournament is that the finals featured a D-styler, which was unheard of, a D-styler being able to compete at the highest levels, so I needed answers. Remember Hellsguard, who gave us some D-style information way earlier in the video? He actually made it to the finals against Angry. After chatting with Hellsguard, he confirmed to me that he had a somewhat easy ride to the finals, as the players he was going against just weren't experienced enough to deal with his years and years of pressure as a D-styler. Angry was a very talented K-styler in this era, and he used his movement to his advantage, never allowing Hells to get close. Because of this, he would ultimately win, but I think it's still neat that a D-styler was able to get this far. One of Hell's D-style buddies, Dagger DD, explained to me that in late 2010, Dagger players actually evolved their style to be more advanced than it was previously throughout most of GunZ history. Dagger DD and a player named Flytermo were able to establish a new animation cancel in the Dagger community that, put simply, were just more advanced than the previous moveset. For those of you who know Ball, it'd be like learning all the late dash K-style combinations after years and years of only being able to do basic reload slash shots and half steps. This would be called Shimmer Shot, or Shimmer, and would help close the gap between top tier D-stylers and average K-stylers just a little bit more. But I will say, Hellsguard getting to this finals is likely the biggest accomplishment for Dagger players throughout all of GunZ history. Thankfully, these finals were captured from Angry's point of view by none other than Bloodthirst 2. Seems like Angry was a member of Headshoot up until the very end. Roy was still out there supporting the game and the players. Props to him. There's only 1 point left in the timeline, and as much as I don't want to cover this, let's do it. On May 31st, 2013, GunZ would officially be closed down by Aeria Games. At this point, MAIET had fully shifted their focus and had already failed on GunZ 2, and the company was planning on closing and would eventually be sold along with all of its intellectual property to MAIET all the way in 2016. GunZ at the end was infested with hackers, not getting updates to fix said hacks. The content was few and far between to non-existent, and game hosting in general, the way ijji and Aeria did, would slowly die itself because something called Steam exists. With a competitive game, the link between the developers and the community is extraordinarily important, which has been proven over the years game after game. But unfortunately, this was not something MAIET ever excelled at. While MAIET managed to capture lightning in a bottle with GunZ and fell ass backwards into one of the most uniquely successful, most difficult, highest skill ceiling shooters in history, they failed to even scratch the surface of what potential this game actually had. Ultimately, with MAIET's purchase in 2016, not much would change until late 2024, when they officially announced the return of GunZ the Duel to Steam. Thankfully, during the now 12-year gap since this game has went offline, the private server community has been steadily evolving the game, adding tons of quality of life features as well as fully fledged out updates for the game as well. In true GunZ fashion, the private server community has not been without its drama, and this game's want and need to eat itself alive. But frankly, it's still surviving, and over the past few years, the game's population has actually been increasing. There's a lot of players who have discovered this game in the 2020s due to viral YouTube and TikTok videos, and because this game is truly a unique experience with an insane skill ceiling that takes a very special type of player to climb through, I think somehow, someway, it will always survive. While MAIET has promised to bring this game back, there's no telling currently what state it will arrive in or if the game will continue to get more life put back into it after over a decade away from the spotlight. I, of course, am rooting for the game, will be making content for the game, and really hope they involve the community and just do their best. I wanted to capture everything I could for this video historically about the game before it begins its next chapter. I have no doubt in my mind that after all of this research, literally months and months of work on this project, that this will be one of the largest things anyone ever did for this game media-wise, and I'm happy to do it. This game has meant everything to me, and genuinely, without it, for reasons I don't want to explain, my life would be completely different, and I just owe so much to this game. I hope going forward it continues to thrive and we treat it with respect. At the end of the day, no matter who owns the game, it's on us as a community to keep it alive if we want to. I can't believe that this covers every single piece of significant history that I was able to find with sources in GunZ, and some without sources. I had so much fun making this timeline, writing this video, collaborating with so many players across the community that I wouldn't be able to name them all. It's truly unlocked hundreds and hundreds of memories going through all of this. Spending so many hours on archive.org just looking through old stuff, it was genuinely therapeutic for myself, and I hope the few thousand of us that were locked into GunZ as kids as you watch this video. While I was making this video, not only was I trying to make a timeline of all the events as well, but I was trying to make a list of notable players and notable clans from certain eras, but I wanted to make this video before I died of old age, so I just had to draw a line somewhere. There's so much more to explore in this game somehow. Ultimately, I think this will do a great job of preserving most of the game's history with hopefully not too much bias, although I can't help but not be able to just shut the fuck up when it comes to this game sometimes. I just truly love it. I want to give a special thanks to some people who helped me with this video because without them, it just wouldn't have been this good. Thanks to the Thief Clan, you'll always be my boys. Thanks to HolyForce, Yong, Tetsuo, Sid, Bergs, Alinda, Energy, Hellsguards, Dagger DD, and GunZ Memories. Without all of you, less things would be accurate and I'd know less about GunZ. So thank you for your unique insight and resources. I know for sure I forgot about some people who have helped me along the way, so if I did forget you, well, my bad. I've been working on this for almost all of 2025 at this point, so it's tough to remember everyone. As always, shout out to the Tier 2 channel members. If you want to help support me, you can join the channel below for just as little as $1 single. That is it from me, guys. Peace.